a lot of people who will tell you with a straight face they're into the wellness stuff really are into the aesthetics of it. And I think that as a culture, it's probably a good thing for more of us than fewer of us to be okay with the fact that appearance matters for us. A lot of bodybuilders just are into wellness simply because it allows them to continue to do what they do. A lot of folks in the bodybuilding space, they're like, people will have conversations with them about wellness, and they're like, yeah, that's good. That'll help me gain more muscle, lose more fat. The foundation of having a great physique is being well.
You've heard this a million times, the female population, I don't want to get too big. And I always laugh.
People feel guilty about saying, I want to look good with no clothes or any clothes on. And yes, it is a little shallow, fine, but real humans want it, and it means something to them. Wow, this is a phenomenal question I've actually never been asked. But I gotta be honest, hopefully this is okay to say on the show, but
Hi, I'm Gabby Reece. I'm a retired professional volleyball player and co-founder of XPT Fitness and Laird Superfoods. On this podcast, we interview experts about the latest in health and fitness so you can maximize performance in all areas of your busy life. And today I'm talking with professional bodybuilder and professor of exercise and sports science at Lehman College, Dr. Mike Israetel. Listen, everyone has their own fitness journey. For some, it's a lifelong obsession. And for others, it starts and stops every 2 weeks because maybe you have family coming in town, or it's the holidays or work, or for any other number of reasons. How do we break out of that repetitive start and stop cycle? So important. Dr. Mike has devoted his life to helping people build long-term personal health. So I brought him on to talk about what he's learned guiding thousands of people through their health journey. Plus, at the end of the podcast, we get into the nitty-gritty about supplements like creatine and hear about Dr. Mike's experience using steroids. There is a lot to talk about. Welcome to the Gabby Reece Show. Let's go. Dr. Mike, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me. Are you in Detroit? Where are you?
yeah, the metropolitan Detroit area or thereabouts.
Yeah. I was thinking about this when I was getting ready to have this conversation, that if I asked you 15 years ago, what you thought you might be doing right now, was any of this kind of on the landscape, or was it a matter of pulling all of the things together to kind of really build something new and really interesting?
I had no intentions 15 years ago. What year was that? 2009. In 2009, I was coaching folks. I was a personal training folks along with my co-founder from RP, Mr. Nick Shaw. And we were coaching personal training folks in an upscale studio in New York City, in Manhattan. And
easy clientele.
Yeah, sure. And I think at the beginning of that process, I didn't know what my future was going to hold. And at the end of that year, I knew that I was going to be going to a PhD program to learn sports science. And I think I planned to be a professor and maybe coach some clients on the side. And that was what I was going to do. And I think Nick planned to just continue to be a personal trainer. And so we never had really any big plans. More recently, I guess, bigger plans, but I am absolutely not one of these people that had a vision of what my life was going to be like. People that win the Olympics and stuff, or celebrities that make it big. They're like, oh, when I was 7 years old, I was singing into the cups at home when I was washing dishes, and I knew I would perform at the Met. I didn't know anything at all. I had no idea where I was going, and was still not super future oriented. I'm future oriented in the grand sense of I have very distinct ideas about where I think society is going and technological evolution, but my own personal stuff, what I'm going to be doing, well, good God, I'm just trying to keep everything in balanced in this crazy balancing act I do with all the stuff I do, and just not screwing up. So I don't even know where I'm headed from here.
Well, but obviously you have a way that you do things. You're an academic, but you've competed in jiu-jitsu, in professional bodybuilding. So there is some theme here as far as, the areas that you're interested in. When you were a 16 or 17-year-old young man, were you sort of one of those really intrigued with being jacked?
It grew on me, literally. Boom. All right, I'll stop. But so when I started lifting weights, I was like 14, 15 years old. Basically, we can say 15 for convenience. And it was after my first wrestling season where I like felt physically that I could have been stronger. And so I started lifting weights to get stronger for wrestling. And I did that for a few years without really enjoying it. And then eventually I started to like lifting weights, and I kind of hypothesized I started lifting weights. I was like a roughly 100 pounds body weight. And I thought, if I get like a Bruce Lee physique, then I'm going to look cool because he looks cool and he's like ripped and has muscles or whatever. And then I remember distinctly when the summer before my senior year in high school, so I must have been 16, 17 years old, 17. I finally bulked up to 160 pounds. Now, I had gained roughly 20 pounds a year up till that point. And so when I got to 160, my muscles, various muscles of mine, specifically, I believe my chest, took on like a roundness that I didn't really like know muscles had. And I was like way more jacked than Bruce Lee at that point. Cause he didn't look at like rounded muscles. He had very kind of sharp, defined muscles. And I remember thinking, I was like, this is kind of cool. Do I want more of this? And then I didn't really pursue muscularity for a while because I started powerlifting, and then the goal was strength. And so up through my college years, I just focused on strength, but building muscle size is probably one of the best ways to get stronger. And then towards the end of my undergraduate career, I got a little bit less into powerlifting. I started reading bodybuilding magazines, and I was like, whoa, this is really cool. And I finally had enough muscle to kind of sort of maybe look like maybe I was training for muscle size. And then I started kind of training more and more for size and less for strength. And eventually I fell so much in love with that process and the look and the changes that I began to consider competing in bodybuilding, and kind of the rest is history. So I didn't plan on ever getting ultra jacked when I was 16 or 17. But every time I got to a new level of jacked, for the most part, I was like, whoa, this is really cool. And then I was like, can I go further than this? It's almost like reaching a new, like you're climbing mountains in Nepal, and you climb like the fifth highest mountain, and you get to the top and you look around, you're like, wow. But then you look over on the horizon, you're like, what's that? And someone's like, that's K2. It's the second tallest mountain in the world. You're like, it's up there still, huh? So let's climb that one. And then so it's kind of been that kind of journey. So very different than a lot of people have this kind of glory vision, for I'm going to be XYZ when I grow up. I didn't have that. I thought I was going to be like a space marine or something when I was 8, and that just never materialized, unfortunately.
Was there a big press in your family to do a grown-up job? Like, I didn't grow up in a family where, a career was a big conversation. Did you come from a family that it was like, you're going to have a serious job?
Yeah, it was a non-negotiable. It was both explicitly stated and implicitly implied my entire life. I'm a Russian Jew. And so like you either have a professional career, or your parents are embarrassed to talk about you at their dinner parties they go to with their other Russian friends. Like, I think one of the biggest sources of satisfaction for like Russian Jewish community in the United States, of which there are very many people, is being able to be at a dinner party, which these folks, they like to party, right? And so like every weekend, my parents growing up would have like, they'd go to somebody else's dinner party, or they'd have one at the home, alcohol and food and laughs. And there's just a bunch of adults sitting around a table and having a great time for like 6 hours, on a Friday night or a Saturday night. And I think one of the biggest flexes possible was when people asked you how your children were doing in school, and how, if you were older and your children were older, how they were doing in college, and how they were doing in medical school or law school, or how they were doing in their career, and were they raising a family. And so at every juncture, being able to say nice things that are truthful to your friends that are asking and acquaintances that are sitting there is like ultra important. But also the corollary of that is if your kids are underaccomplished in any of those endeavors at any point in their lives, then it's like a grandiosely, painfully embarrassing. And I think a lot of people kind of share that situation. It's almost like if you come from a like a family of African Americans from the metropolitan Atlanta region, and like a family that has had sports greats in their lineage. Like you go to hang out and people are like, how's Chandler doing at volleyball camp? And you're like, oh, she's not doing so. Like it's crushes you. What are you doing? This is what we do. And so in much the same way, I think in my upbringing, for my parents and stuff, it was a really big deal to be professionally successful. But concomitantly, people thought you were supposed to like grow out of sports once you turned like, I don't know, 22, maybe, probably more like 18. And then so when I continued to be in sport, my parents were like at best confused and at worst like, why are you still doing this? Mm-hmm. So I definitely got some of that. How about you? I mean, like, you're a sports legend. Like, was there like an understanding you were going to be great, or was there like, you just do what you do?
Yeah, no, not at all. I grew up in the Caribbean, so it was very different. It was more loosey goosey, and I didn't have sort of a deep family tradition. I have to tell you, I've had to learn it the other way because my husband's also an athlete, and I have 3 daughters, and you have to change your filter of what makes your life successful or easy for you or makes things better, and sort of not put that on your children. And once you can take your teeth out of it, it's a much smoother trip. But it is interesting how the impulse is very strong, like for your culture, maybe it's like, hey, education is the way. And of course we want to be educated, but there's a million ways, right, to do that. And that means a million different things. But even as a parent, I have had to really be mindful of not acting like that myself.
That's a trip. There's so much to say about that. I was hospitalized once for minor stuff, but the attending doctor was a Nigerian woman, and I know quite a bit about the Nigerians. I used to date a Nigerian, and I was chatting with her, and I was like, so like when you got into medical school, was your family happy? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, were they more like, this is just the way things are supposed to be, than like ecstatic? She was like, yeah, absolutely. And then I was like, okay, what kinds of degrees does the high success Nigerian family accept as valid? And she was like, doctor, lawyer, engineer, like that's pretty much it. Yeah. So like if for the highly successful Nigerians of the world, if you have you bring your kids to America, you try to give them the best life, and then they like declare English literature as their major in college, like that's a family conversation of like, are you seriously going to squander this opportunity? That's intense. And so, and I'm sure with some athletic families, it's like, if you don't pick a sport, ideally the family's sports, and you don't start getting into that seriously at age 8 or 10, there's like a, what are you doing with your talents kind of conversation. And you as a parent, I'm sure, had to kind of restrain yourself from imposing on children. What do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, 100%. And also learning that your talents, and I put that in quotes, like I have one daughter who's about 6'2", very athletic, very competitive. She also happens to be really smart. And for whatever reason, it's like, I don't actually put as much value on her getting these grades as I would if she did athletics, because I just know in a way what athletics can do for you. And so again, it's relearning. There's a million ways to do it. You're a great example of it, right? That we can get to these places, quote, called success. And if we are given work ethic and all of these things, that then we can create a life that reflects us truly versus, hey, this was expected of me and I'm going to oblige. I actually don't want my children to oblige me because I don't want them to oblige anyone, right? Like I want them to go into the world like questioning and doing all these things. But when I was studying about you, I got the sense that you probably came from a family that was like, hey, we are doctoring and lawyering, and maybe you have a few stand-up comedians as well. But I want to
None of note.
I was thinking, when you're competing in jiu-jitsu and when you're bodybuilding and when you're coaching, right? These are very different people. In what way are you expressing who you are in each of those? So when you were in jiu-jitsu, what part of your personality, what was the one that was sort of living or driving that ship at that time versus somebody in bodybuilding versus someone in coaching?
Wow. I can answer this question. This is a phenomenal question I've actually never been asked. The part of my personality that I exude the most when I compete in jiu-jitsu is predation. I am predating. I'm hunting. I am committing, I am committing violence, and not in a way that expresses rage or frustration, but in a way like a lion kills a gazelle. He's after something very specific, and he doesn't exude fear. He or she, actually females do most of the hunting as far as I can tell. The female lioness is on a trajectory of getting something that is not voluntarily being given to her. It's very one way. It is not cooperative. It is not collegial. It is brutal. And it's cool to feel those vibes, but it's not something you want to bring to a grocery store at 12 p.m. on a Sunday. So it requires a little bit of a folding into a different kind of, I suppose exactly like you said, expressing a different part of your character. So that's the competitive jiu-jitsu part. And you can't even bring that kind of attitude into like between matches. It's something you have to be able to flip the switch for. I have a bit of a knack for that. So like, just even a few seconds before I go, I can get into the headspace where like it's time to do the thing,
Yeah.
and as an athlete, I'm sure you can. Do you have a
I
switch, or are
used
you
to,
kind of
I
always
also
on?
because it wasn't contact. I think I would gear up. I would put on a character, and maybe as a female, I had to kind of put on a character
Yes.
because I've seen more often than not. It doesn't mean there aren't female athletes that are not like this. That the men can switch like this, and I feel like the women have to kind of get worked in,
Yes.
into this persona because I don't know it's quite as natural. I think to be competitive is natural, but how we get there, I think, is a little bit different. I have a friend,
Agreed.
Kenny Johnson. He's a wrestler. He goes by Kenny Bolt Wrestling, but he talked about he could kiss a baby and then get on the wrestling mat and be like, "I'm gonna, crush somebody like
Yes.
in like this."
Yes.
What's it like for you though when that energy? Because not everybody has that energy, but guaranteed you've competed against people with that same IQ of what they're doing and the same attitude.
Mm-hmm.
Do you notice it? Does it make
Mm-hmm.
your predatorial instincts kind of even more ramped up? Or are you like, oh, okay, I have my hands full today. Like how do you receive it back to you?
I have a two-part answer to that. One part is it's a little bit one directional. I have so much to do on the mat. I don't really care what the other person's doing. Like from a technical perspective, I care. I don't really see them as like a human being anymore. I see them as their leg is right there and I'm going to trip them and they're going to fall. But if they're really pushing back and giving me a lot of problems and they're aggressive, I like revel in that. It's like, there was a scene from a movie, one of my favorite movies of all time. It's called The 13th Warriors from the 90s. It's with Antonio Banderas. And it's about the Vikings. And they were like trapped in this cave. And one of them was like too injured. He was still good to fight, but too injured to continue. And he's like, go, go, go without me. And they're like, are you sure? He's like, go, go, go. And then like you hear the screams of his enemies approaching and he's like excited to get it done. Like, I love it. I want warfare. And so when a person's really giving you a hard roll, there's a glory to that. Like, this is what we came for. It's weird if you like bully someone on the mat and you just totally crush them and they like whimper. You're like, ugh. Like I've had thoughts in the middle of rolls where I'm like, oh my God, I'm just going to turn it down a little bit and kind of, end the match softly. But when someone's really pushing back, it's like, this is exactly what I came here to do. And if someone beats me with more aggression and skill, what a great way to go down. What an honor. Like, I got beat by someone ravenous. Amazing. Let's do it again. Like, that is my perspective, which is why I'm like addicted to combat sport, clearly.
But I think there's something so healthy, and we've lost it through just, we're over civilized, over neutralized, is giving that energy. Is it aggression, masculinity and aggression, a really safe and reasonable place? There's some rules.
Yes.
You can develop it. I think developing that also makes you more peaceful and easygoing in your day-to-day life when you are with the general population. But I think there would be something really interesting if we had, sort of a really great place for people to be able to express that. I think it's actually so positive.
It's super positive. I think, especially to your point, males and young males, that stuff's flowing out of them anyway. Like, evolution built us to do this. And so for me, when I get it, it kind of doesn't matter if I get beat up a lot or I do the beating or 50-50. After that episode, whether it be in training or competition, I feel so free and so bereft of that feeling of aggression and predation. And I feel so loving to everyone and to myself. I feel so reduced in anxiety. And, I just like, if I'm like before competition or before a roll, if someone, like bumps into me at the store or says something really rude, and then I turn and I'm like, oh, sorry. And they're like, let's do something about this right now. Got a 50-50, like, all right, let's get it popping. But if I had just gone to practice and gotten mauled or did some mauling, if someone's like, hey, let's do something, I'm going to be like, God, listen, sir, I'm just going to be right out of your way. Please have a nice day. All love and respect. Because like, I have nothing left to prove or to give, like I've already dumped all that male aggression out, and I got nothing here at the store is going to solve any problems for anyone. Whereas if I'm kind of pent up, it's like, oh, you want a shot at the title? Let's go. And of course, that's stupid because you go to jail and you hurt people and all this other terrible stuff.
Right.
But just even the temptation is gone. So it's super, super awesome for my mental environment to that respect. But to the rest of your question, so you asked about competition in jiu-jitsu,
Mm-hmm.
so it's predation. In bodybuilding, I just don't see it as a competition because in some ways it's only a competition for the judges. Like in volleyball, you can smash the ball into someone's face, you can smash it to the ground, and they're like, you beat them, period. Like, why'd you lose? Because she's too good. But in bodybuilding, like, you just pose to the judges and they determine who wins and who loses. So there's a camaraderie and collegiality between bodybuilding competitors backstage that's just like much greater than most sports. There's no confrontation. It just never occurs. And I think what I channel bodybuilding backstage and on the stage is art. Like, it's really art. Like, you made yourself into some kind of weird sculpture, pose, exude, not even confidence, but the pleasantness of, wow, doesn't this look cool, everyone? Isn't this neat? And then so it's more like an artist would present their grand work at the Guggenheim or something like that. Like, look at this. It has nothing to do with violence or aggression. Like, a lot of people, are on tons of steroids, me included, backstage. And so you get those thoughts of like, let's do this. But you have to remind us, like, there's nothing to do. Like, posing is not a violent confrontational thing. It's not even really against someone. It's the judges look at that guy and they look at you and they look at that guy and then they sort you how they're going to sort you. It is fundamentally all the stuff that was up to you already has passed. You already did the training, you already did the diet, you already did the peaking. You're going to look how you're going to look on stage. So a lot of people say the best way to approach bodybuilding is to just super enjoy the whole process. It's more of like a grand tour. And that's a real big context switch from other sports in which, like, so imagine as an athlete myself, my wife's an athlete as well. We've been watching the Olympics now in reruns on NBC or whatever. And I watch these wrestlers and these beach volleyball players. We watched a lot of beach volleyball, and they're walking up to the arena, to the court, to the mat. And I'm like, can you imagine how much pressure you're under? The Olympics. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, it only happens 4 years and you have your USA logo on and you're repping the USA. The entire United States of America sort of is watching you. oh, holy crap, like how do you sleep in the days leading up to that? How do you do anything? Whereas with bodybuilding, you got to get really good sleep for your body to look good. And so the less stressed you are, the better for your physique. And the good thing is that the bad thing is that in sports like real, or we're going to call them real sports, wrestling, volleyball, etc., you know that it's going to come a time where you got to turn up and turn it on. And so you're just waiting. Whereas in bodybuilding, you're not really waiting for anything. Like the party starts right now. It starts 3 days before you even put on your tan. You're done with everything. You just got to chill and relax and get into the show. It's a very different vibe, an artistic vibe, not a combative, not a sports vibe. Does that make any sense, or am I rambling into the ether?
No, it makes a ton of sense. It's such a different perspective. And yeah, I have to, when they started changing, when you said, oh, and get your tan on, I did think it was kind of funny that they changed, like you could do your body, but you couldn't do your face.
Some people do that.
I was like, oh, okay. And then, obviously you are analytical and academic and scientific. So the coach in you, is it somebody who is always taking a 30,000 foot view and trying to assess and figure long-term goals? Like which part of you is coaching? And what I think is so interesting is, so wrestling is more for you. Bodybuilding there's probably something sort of fun for you and probably your wife, actually, I'm sure.
She doesn't care at all about bodybuilding, not in the slightest.
I know, but then she'll just be like, sweetie, you're just even a little bigger and a little leaner this week. It's like, I'm sure, I'm kidding, but it's probably fun for her. But the coach,
I can tell you what she thinks about it if you would like, but as please
she
finish your
married
question.
you. She must, it must be fun to live with you when you're on the diet part though. Oh my God.
So a lot of times we'll just diet together, and so it's easier that way. But I got to be honest, hopefully this is okay to say on the show, but I've had some conversations with my wife way more recently than I'd like to admit, where I realized she doesn't even find the muscles compellingly attractive. Like this is remotely not why she's with me. And I was, in a sense, I was like, oh, that's nice. But in a sense, I was like, damn,
yeah.
Well, all right, it's this
there's
huge
a lot,
part of
there's
me,
a lot of
literally.
it around,
right. You would think oh, my wife could at least appreciate this, but
she likes your
good
IQ.
news is when I become older and less muscular, I don't think she's going to care, because that's not why she's in. So I always thought that was interesting. But with the coaching side, honestly, the thing when you initially asked the question, the first thing I knew I was going to say was I am exuding compassion instead of the analytical side. The analytical side, is always there in the background. That's the easy part. You get educated enough, you coach enough clients, and the analytical side is just as easy as breathing. But what I try to do with coaching folks is to take, they're here and I'm here and on opposite sides, and I want to move myself as closely to their perspective as I can to appraise, what do they think about what they're doing? What do they think about these problems they're facing? What do they see as their goals and their aspirations and their assessments of, this is why I haven't succeeded before? These are the problems I'm encountering. These are the questions I have. I do have a little bit of a knack, maybe, if it's okay for me to be moderately self-complimentary, as I always am. I'm an egotistical idiot, but I can do a decent job at taking the perspective of a client, because I've been a client before. We started this whole journey because I was not in a shape that I found to be the most interesting to me. I wanted to be in a different shape, and I knew almost nothing. So I know what it's like to want to be in a different shape, but know almost nothing about what the hell I'm supposed to do to get there. And so I love taking that client perspective and kind of grabbing their hand, consensually, of course, and walking alongside them, so to speak, to kind of show them hey, here are options of what to do. What do you think about these? And they go, well, I think that one's pretty cool. And I'll be like, that one's really cool, but it's going to require XYZ sacrifice. And they go, ooh, let's leave that for now. What about that one? And they go, that one's really neat. It's kind of a little bit simpler, a little bit more straightforward. And once we accomplish it, we can reassess and maybe climb that next bigger mountain together. And I love that approach. Requires literally empathy, right? Where you're I'm trying to put myself in your shoes and seeing how you see it. And I have the benefit of seeing how you see it now. with my knowledge and background. So like you see a pinhole of light and I see this grand painting and I'm like, ooh, but I do see your pinhole. Let me move your pinhole for you to this. What do you think about that? And they go, that looks cool. I'm like, okay, let me expand it for you. And so that's less of the analytical, like do data kind of like, oh, well, here's how we're going to plot your weight trends and how macros, and that stuff generally happens like quietly at home on the computer after you've consulted the client. But during the consultation itself, which happens all the time if you work with someone, it's much more of an exercise of putting yourself into that person's position. And I've never lost the memory of how it feels to have aspirations and goals and problems to want to fix and feeling a little bit powerless as to how to do it. I think a lot of people who have a lot of success in their lives, their recency bias gives them this thing that like everyone feels empowered all the time. Like, no, not even close, especially not your clients. And so if you can level with them and say, look, I know what it's like to be real confused and apprehensive and not even so sure I can accomplish these things, because clients will say, I have this goal. Is this even reasonable? And you have to be like, I totally understand where you're coming from, but no, this is an insane goal that 1 out of 1,000 people can accomplish. Or you go, you're actually shooting real low. We can even do a little better than this, and everything in between.
You know, it's funny. I think we always hear, oh, be of service. People don't realize to take that point of view, what you're saying, to be compassionate and with a level of empathy, and to also be rooting for someone else's success. I think it builds our lives and feeds our lives in an exponential way, even more than like sometimes winning yourself. There's something, it just gives you so differently. And I really appreciate that distinction. It's very beautiful. In fact, we have a producer on this show who's been using your program, already lost 11 pounds. And, you know, what he really appreciates about that is, first of all, the kind of straightforwardness. He talks about the way you communicate, the directiveness. It's not, you know, he's like, I don't want a bunch of fluffy stuff. And obviously he probably got to pick and choose here and there. And I go, fluffy, like with a kettlebell, on a one leg with a one arm. He's like, yeah, I just want it like straight. And I go, will you get bored? And he goes, no. So I want to first ask you, in getting information, because you said, hey, I didn't know how I was going to get that. First of all, younger people, unless they're doing a sport like wrestling or football, where you sort of need extra protection or strength, explosiveness, power, is there sort of a time for young people that you would say, hey, it's better to start lifting for most people? Let's say they're not in a specific sport. Is it better when, growth plates are shut? Like, is it a little bit older? When is it that you feel like really adding lifting is a good idea, is a sound idea for people?
It's a really good question. I'd say it's mostly answered by 2 parts. Part 1 is the child mentally mature enough to be able to learn, appraise, and execute good technique, and also make sure to restrain themselves from doing terrible technique at the benefit of getting 1 or 2 more repetitions. So if someone's not mature enough to stop when their back starts rounding like a question mark during squats and it no longer looks like a squat, it looks like some terrible car accident is impending, then, they're just not old enough to be in the gym. And I know 40-year-olds that aren't old enough to be in the gym, if you know what I mean. But so one thing, you need at least some level of understanding, what a repetition is, what good technique is. Can they reliably demonstrate good technique rep after rep after rep? And can they do it at some point unassisted and unmonitored? Not in the literal sense of like you just leave, but in the sense of like you go, all right, 5 reps in the squat, and you just zip the lip and then you just do it. You're like, all right. If they're able to do that, if they're able, not literally from day one, but if they're able to listen when you talk to them and able to demonstrate their best idea of what a squat is, are they able to improve upon that technique with a couple of reps of coaching? Are they engaged? Do they understand when you say, okay, sit back on your heels, what that means? So you try to coach some like 5-year-olds and they're just like, their attention span is not there. And that brings me to the second factor. So factor 1 is, do they have the technical acumen? Like, imagine coaching 3-year-olds in volleyball. Like, what would that even look like? Like a pillow shaped like a volleyball? That's as far as close as you get. Like, they're not able to comprehend fundamentals. But the second part is a really big part. It's, do they want to be there? because I've had a lot of parents ask me at what age should I get my child into the weight room? And I'm like, if you want them to hate you for a long time and never lift weights again because it's something their dad made them do that they hated when they were way too young to like it, yeah, man, right now is great.
Yeah.
Some people try to get like 8-year-olds into the gym. I didn't even know what the gym was when I was 8.
No.
And if I found out, I'd have been like, ugh. I was 14 years old, and this was before wrestling. So that literal same year that I started lifting weights, I was in the gym. I was a high school freshman. I was in the high school gym with some friends, and we were just kind of messing around with the weights. And I was like one of the weaker kids, hilariously. And it wasn't because I was weaker. I had no egotistical, like, oh, I'm not strong. I just remember lifting and being like, I just walked out. Like, it just wasn't up my alley. And so it's really important that kids being introduced to weight training have those two factors of, are they like old enough to be able to do structured, boring things in a technical way? And then 2, are they interested in being there for their own needs? Like some kids, you'll show them weights and they go, and it's understandable. I mean, Jesus, weights are such an adult, boring, terrible thing. Like kids just have way more fun. Like you're like, hey, what do you want to do? Like, I want to play hide and seek and run around the house. You're like, that sounds more fun than going up and down with a thing that hurts you. Like that's a real tough sell. But some kids will be like, I really want to try this and do more of it. And then like, hey, listen, if you are 4 and you tell me you want to try it, but you can't pay attention long enough to do the lift I'm demonstrating, here's your ball back. Go here. We'll give you some heavy sandbags to play with. Just throw those around how you like. When you're 6, we'll go back to the gym. But if you never want to be in the gym, I'd personally say just never go. There's so many great ways to get exercise and get fit and get active and get healthy than going to the gym. I mean, you can play a ton of sports. You could just, take daily walks. You could do some push-ups and bodyweight squats in your basement. Nobody ever has to go to the gym. That's crazy. And a great way to poison a child's mind against ever liking the gym or in the near term is to do that old, American dad thing. You're going to be the best power lifter since me, boy. And then you're in there making them train and they hate it. I've seen that in real life.
Yeah.
You know that like degree of awkwardness where you just want to like melt into one of the walls and just disappear. Like that is the emotion. I get like, oh, I don't want to be around this.
Yeah.
And do you know who was it Todd and Dan Marinovich are? Do you know the Marinovich story?
Well, because
like that's the ultimate example.
You know what's so funny to me about the Marinoviches though? If you really sort of dissect a lot of the training, it's pretty genius. But some of the stuff, especially like for a wrestler, all the other handed stuff and the Swiss ball,
Sure.
it's crazy. So
Sure.
good. But you thought, okay, did that experiment with his own son, that didn't work. Listen, I've thought about that many times because I try to remind people all the time, and I tell my girls this, I am not your coach. I am your mother. And that is a very different role. And that's not to say I see certain like tennis players and their dad is their coach and that works, but it would only work if the kid's like, that's what I would like. So that might be one scenario, but when it is the parent driving, I don't think the long-term, story on that is usually great. It's it's either they hate it the whole time, even if they won. Is that success? I don't think so.
Oh,
I don't think that's almost worse.
Point?
They were champions and they hated it. It's like Agassi. It's like, oh, well, okay, that's weird.
Is that really true about it?
Yeah. He said he hated the whole thing.
Holy crap.
I know. Well, so
that's intense.
That makes me think about, let's say somebody comes to you because, we're banging the drum all the time about, hey, like we do need some kind of muscle. Like you need, forget, like you are in a very specific, sharp end of the stick field, bodybuilding, athletic training, but let's just say a regular, but more aware person. They're interested in health and longevity. You hear over and over, hey, you got to have muscle and you can still build muscle, but you better keep your muscle and you got to get your muscle. So besides in the gym, if you have somebody come to you, they're 35, 40, they've had a real job. They looked up one day and thought, I haven't really worked out much. I started having kids. I got to get back into it, for the next 50 years. Is there a way around it out of the gym? Is it like pull-ups and push-ups and body squats? Is that for real? Or do you think most people typically it's sort of the quickest, most productive way to go is to bang some iron.
I mean, the gym is undefeated as far as getting your results in a short
Yeah.
time. There's a reason they built gyms, and it's because like it's the fastest path to getting jacked. Like, you don't go to a professionally paved and like a clocked racetrack if you're just a regular person. But if you're a race car driver, like you can't get race car driving skills on just the regular freeway. It's dangerous. It's stupid. And even if you just get a big old open lot, it's just like, the curves, the roads aren't banked or anything. It's just like, you want to become the best race car driver you can, you go to the track. You want to become the most jacked in the least amount of time, you go to the gym. However, if you even just have a pair of 10 or 15 or 25-pound dumbbells or something like that, and a little bit of open space in your home, you can get so much unbelievable result in gaining muscle and losing fat and reshaping your body and getting healthier, that like, if you're like, look, the gym just logistically does not work for me, no problem. Is not the same thing as to say, like, look, if you can get access to a gym, definitely consider going. It's awesome. It'll also be more fun over the long term because there's so many different machines and barbells and dumbbells to try at the gym, and to keep it really fun. Because if you just like have a pair of 25-pound dumbbells at home, we even have a product at RP called the RP Gym Free Templates. And there's like tons of workouts with just 2 dumbbells that you can get your whole body into amazing shape if you're that person coming back after children and being like, am I still a physical entity? I guess I should take care of my health. So we have that. But, at some point, just a bunch of dumbbell movements in the same spot in your house in front of the refrigerator just gets kind of like stale. And also the gym, this is a minor point, but I think one maybe worth mentioning. There's a culture at the gym that's kind of neat. Everyone's there for the same purpose, to get in shape. And it's totally non-competitive. Like, no one getting in shape is going to hurt anyone else getting into less shape. That doesn't make any sense. There's kind of like a thing where you could, you had a hard day at work, you picked up the kids, you sat them down for homework, you started to cook some food, and you're like, oh, I need to do my workout. You look at your 25-pound weights in the corner, you're like, all right, gotta try to switch it up, turn on some music or something. But you go into a gym, you can almost smell like, we're here to do the thing, and everyone's doing the thing. And also like, people recognize you at the gym. You have friends at the gym. You have acquaintances, people you chat with, the front desk person. And at some point, they kind of expect you to keep coming back. And so, like, if you quit weight training for 6 months because insert excuse, and sometimes valid reason here, then, like, the 25-pound weights in the corner, they don't judge you. But there's a human, cultural, community side to the gym in which, like, logically, I can tell you straight up, no one judges the gym. No one cares. Everyone's insanely self-centered. The front desk person forgot who you were weeks ago. But as a human, you don't feel like that. And that can be leveraged to be a good thing, because you're like, I was at the gym last week and I know some people there. 5 p.m. I always say hi to Bob. And Bob asked me once when I skipped a week, hey, where were you last week? And I was so damn guilty answering him that I was just lazy and they had good stuff on Netflix. So I made up a stupid excuse and I felt terrible about it. You know what? Like, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to lift with my friends and I'm going to be there every week, Monday and Thursday, consistently. It becomes a thing that you do. And then it's so much easier and more fun and more pleasant to sustain. And sustainment is the name of the game, because you get some cool benefits from lifting for a few weeks. But if you lift for months and years consistently, it's like engineering a new shell for a cyborg. You get a new body, and that is a huge trip.
I think it's so important what you're saying too, is people will look left and right and think, oh, that, like, they'll say, well, Dr. Mike doesn't even need to have people to train with. He just gets it done on his own. Well, that's not true. You have people that you meet, that you train with, that you're going to show up for. They're going to show up for you. I even could sense it between you and your wife, that they're sort of like, I'm going, you're going, we're going, like that kind of built-in mechanism. And so people have to realize that we all need it. Maybe a distance runner, they're those people who can go in their brain and sort of take off, and they're very unusual.
It's so funny, Gabby, that you're saying that, because that's so true for so many distance runners. Like, first of all, they're just built different. They're special. They're tougher than all the other athletes, yes, us included.
They are.
Nobody's trying to run that long. But it's also true that apparently one of the biggest and most exploding aspects of fitness, especially in urban environments, are running clubs. I mean, like I was just a little while back, I was with some friends in Austin, Texas, which is like, the big hubbub nowadays. And they were like, dude, every single person of a reproductive age is at a running club. That's where you go to meet people. That's where you go to see. That's where you go to be seen. And one of the number one reasons posited for the explosion of running clubs is like community,
Yeah.
not just a place you go to like, meet people to do explicit things with afterwards, though that's certainly fun. But like people, again, it's cool to do something with a group.
Yeah.
If I'll tell you this, if you are a person who needs a little bit of a boost, and we're all that person sometimes, if you run by yourself, you're like, I'm going to run today. I'm not going to tell myself how many miles. And after like 2 miles, you're like, I'm going home. Like, it's just don't have it today. If the running club runs 5 miles every day and you start with the running club group, you're not going to do 2 miles. You're going to finish. Just that human nature element of like we have a dog at home. She's an old English bulldog, and like dogs are pack animals. So like if we're on this side of the backyard, she goes with us and she does her little stuff. She plays with her bones. If my wife and I go to the other side of the backyard, she'll come with us also.
Mm.
And it's like she's there for the community, literally. And so as a person with a running club or a person who lifts at a gym with other humans, some people, they just couldn't care less. Like you lock them in a closet, they'll do the same thing as if you put them in front of 10,000 people. But most of us, at least on our bad days, have that situation. And not just the 5 miles itself, but also the pace. Like if you really feel like, meh, you could just jog your run and be like, I'm okay. It's between God and I. God, you're good. He's like, you're good. No, it was cool. No worries. But if like there's people that like you and I probably both have this in our hearts, that like slightly egotistical athlete feeling of like, I'm better than this person. You know what I mean? Like not like it's not the most positive feeling in the world, but like I got this. If you're at the running club and someone's like, you're like just feeling not like physically you're fine, mentally you don't have it that day, and someone who you always run ahead of starts passing you, you're like, nope, never in a million years is Katie gonna pass me. Not today, not tomorrow. And then you're going, and then afterwards you feel great, you feel accomplished. Nobody really wants to run until they show up to run, and then they really want to run. So
Yeah.
that I'm not saying that at-home fitness isn't awesome. It's so amazing for so many people. But if you can get to a real life gym, there's some magic there for some folks.
Yeah, because I just, like to reemphasize, and especially you've heard this a million times, the female population. I don't want to, I don't want to get too big. And I always laugh. I'm like, I have lifted weights since 1987. And granted, I am tall and I don't lift for mass, but I still, it's like it doesn't just happen. And just the importance of that. And somebody who has coached a lot of different types of people, let's say householders, so maybe people who do it just to take care, weekend warriors, people who are athletic but they still are juggling their life and their sport, and also athletes. You've done the gambit. This is a question I ask a lot of people that work with a civilian population about trying to encourage them to take care of themselves. What is the thing that you see over and over that's why they're not getting it done? I am always baffled that so many people, more than the amount that do, haven't figured out a way that actually, besides maybe some type of survival in their family, is the most important thing, their health. What do you see over and over with people that's why they don't get it done? I'll give you an example. There's a woman named Beth Lewis. She works out of, she was in Austin and works with a lot of clients. And she said her answer was, they always think they have more time. Like, next Monday, or in the, like after the holidays, I'll get going. It's like, it's that for her is what she saw. I was just curious what shows up when you visit with people and it's just so hard for them to put it together.
It's a great question. I love Beth's answer. What I will say to her answer, I was thinking about this as you're asking the question. Some people do that delay situation. And then when the doctor's like, look, you have terminal cancer, the delay gets instantly flipped into resignation of like, well, I'm not the workout type anymore because I just got some months or some years. I just got to soak it up with family and friends. And then it's like, wow, you really just did that trick, and you excused yourself entirely from ever having to work out. First it was a delay, and then it was too late. You're like, well, it's too late. You know what I mean? It's like your kid wants to go to some arcade that closes at 9 p.m. and you're like, okay, like we're gonna go soon. And then when it gets to be 8:30, you know the thing's 30 minutes away. You're like, sorry, Connor, it's just we're just too late. We'll go tomorrow. It's like, you planned this, Mom, you liar. You're like, sort of, you know. So that's unfortunate to see. I think that, to me, a reason that stands out for why some folks just never manage to get it together with their fitness. Obviously, we're talking about the subcategory of people that want to do something, right? Because if you don't want, number one is there's just no interest. And I've been asked a few times, how do you inculcate interest in people? And I'm like, I have absolutely no idea. I have no idea how to get people interested in anything at all. Now, if you're interested, boy, do I have a lot of weapons for you to use. But if you're not interested, I have nothing to tell you. Like, not that this matters, but politically, I'm like a libertarian. I'm just super for freedom. So if you're like, I don't like lifting weights, I'm like, whatever, F lifting weights. No one needs it. I agree, whatever. But if you want to lift weights, I'm like, oh boy, do I have like solutions for you and things to try. So a lot of people are just not interested, but people who are at least like, verbally will say they're interested. And even those who in their heart of hearts feel interested, I think the big thing that knocks people off is a kind of a two-factor thing. One is it's extra stuff in your life that hurts. Like, the extra part is you got to carve out time in your schedule. But I got stuff to do. I have a whole rich life with kids and Netflix and field trips and all this other stuff. And I'm supposed to like add lifting in somewhere. Like, it's already an inconvenience. Now, technically speaking, eating delicious food at a restaurant or having excellent, sexual relations with someone is also an inconvenience. We're going to mess the bed up, but it feels great. So you don't have to talk anyone into going and having a great steak or a great time with another person. But lifting to the uninitiated, forget I said lifting, exercise to the uninitiated quite literally feels painful, and every part of your body screams, stop doing these to yourself. What are you doing? Why are you hurting me? Weren't we friends? Remember how much I love you. Go home, have a beer, sit down. Let's rethink this. I mean, that's how most normal humans perceive exercise, is some combination of inconvenient and literally painful. What ends up happening after typically about 4 to 6 weeks of just gritting your teeth and getting it done is the development of habit. Now, habit is the grand human superpower to crush all others, but it takes some time. Once you have habit, you get two things out of it. One is you already know how exercise fits into your life. Like, every Monday and every Thursday at 7 p.m., my husband and my kids and my dog know to stay the hell away from Mom because she's getting in the car and she's driving to the gym. Mom's dead to you. From 7 to 8:30 Monday and Thursday, you don't have a mother. You don't have a wife. I'm gone. I'm in the gym. And once people know that around you, once you know that that's your schedule, it's just another thing you do. I mean, you've had young children. Like, getting children to learn how to brush their teeth is like, what? I have to build a habit of toothbrushing? Oh, I don't even remember when I built this habit. My parents did it for me. But once you're an adult and you have the habit of brushing your teeth, you don't have to like it, but you do it. Yeah. It's something like, how many times you go to the office and, Bill's going to start the meeting. He's like, how you doing? You're like, good. And you're like, how you doing, Bill? He's like, just brushing my teeth today was so annoying. You'd be like, are you okay? Did you hit your head on the way over? Like, nobody even complains about it anymore. It's just something you do. If you can just grit your teeth together and do the thing for 4 to 6 weeks consistently, whatever kind of exercise you do several times a week, it's just going to fold into something you do in your life. And then it becomes infinitely easier to do. And it's just something you do. Monday, 7 p.m., Mom's out. She's going to lift weights. That's it. That's the first part. The second part is, as you build those habits, that activity is something that you learn how to be competent in. and you start to see some results, and you start to, your brain associates the activity no longer as much with the pain proximately of doing it, but with that ball or lifting and running and exercising high that you get honestly about a quarter of the way through it, and then hours afterwards. And that high that you get during, the challenge of becoming more successful at it, the increased competency that you're getting with it, the seeing the results, and then 8 weeks later you go get your blood work done because it was just that time of the year, and your doctor's like, I think you reversed age by like 4 years. Nothing is ever stopping you from making it to the gym Monday and Thursday ever again. And so that whole milieu is basically to say you just have to get it done as an adult. Adults, it's one thing I've said for a long time. There's a big difference between children and adults. Yeah. Children do what they want. Adults do what they must. As an adult, you got to switch off the childlike part of your brain that goes, I don't want to exercise, and go, you know what? Go. And the great thing is, the bad thing is that can seem really intimidating because like your first couple of weeks, you feel incompetent, you feel out of place. A lot of people, when they start exercising, they like feel like everyone's judging them and they're not even in shape. And like, what the hell am I doing here? That girl has abs and I have God knows what underneath 8 sweatshirts. I'm not into this. This isn't me. Once you have those feelings, you just have to swallow it. There's just no other way to say it. Once you get in there, it's understandable to think, oh my God, this is exercise. After 2 weeks, you're like, you know what? This isn't for me. If this is this hard and this annoying and this painful all the time, I have no idea how people continue. But those people aren't continuing. They don't have the same experience. They have an experience of weeks and months later, which is some combination of elation and addiction. Like a comment I've gotten, I'm sure you've gotten this more than a handful of times, is like I'll sit next to someone on an airplane and you pop off a conversation and they go, I really find it commendable that your guys' dedication to what you do. And I straight up tell people now, I used to just be like, oh, thank you so much. Now I just straight up cut people off and I'm like, I can spare you. It's not dedication. It's addiction. Yeah. If you keep me out of the gym for a few days, I start to eat my fingernails and grind my teeth. You don't want to see me outside the gym for long enough. I want to be there. And so all those people that go to the gym, the fitness models and stuff, where the housewives that look at them and go, oh my God, like Jesus, like they're just super willpower oriented. How can they do this? They're not willpower oriented. They're children at an amusement park and they can't wait to punch their ticket and go into Disneyland every single day. That's how it feels. But you gotta work up to that. It's not just like some people first day at the gym, they're like fell in love. And I don't know what the hell. I lifted weights for like a year and a half and I hated it. I just did it. I don't know why I did it. I think I just like wanted to be more strong for wrestling at some point. And I considered myself a person who just doesn't quit things easily. So I just kept going. And then when I later transitioned to jiu-jitsu in my like late 20s, almost the best advice I've ever gotten for anything in my life was from my friend, Dr. Melissa Davis. If you ever want to have another guest on your show, she's amazing in every conceivable. She's like a PhD in neuroscience. She's an accomplished hunter, makes sense of that. And she is a jiu-jitsu world champion and all this other crazy stuff, has competed in fitness before. Just like a laundry list of accomplishments. You're like, this is not a real person. You made this up. Like you faked a CV. That's really her in real life. And she was already a very accomplished jiu-jitsu practitioner. And she told me the greatest thing I've ever heard. She goes, your first year is going to suck. Swallow it. You're going to love it after. For me, because I had a wrestling background, because I was really jacked, it only took 6 months until I was like, this is it. But my God, I was ready to quit jiu-jitsu about 30,000 times through that first 6 months. I was like, it's 95 degrees in Kansas City. The gym does not have air conditioning. I'm in a gi, which is a Japanese ceremonial attire from the friggin' 1800s. What the hell am I doing? Why am I doing this? This is terrible. I hate this. And then Mel's voice would appear in my head and go, just suck it up. And I was like, okay. Mel wouldn't lie to me. Go. And then I fell in love. The gym, fitness, any difficult endeavor you'll ever do, a lot of times works like that. Once the habits come in and the passion starts to grow, hey, you're set. But before that, short, limited time, few weeks, crank up the willpower.
Yeah. I always call it like the first month or two of like suspended faith, where you just go, I'm committing and I'm not analyzing and I'm just doing that. And I think it's always so fascinating how our biology works in certain ways. I understand, but it's like our desire to make it easy. But the only way we make progress is by doing it, things that are hard. And I always love how those are dancing against each other all the time. And I feel like once people get that relationship, it does become easier, but it is, it's definitely not easy. And having, again, that compassion, but being honest with people like, hey,
Yes.
you can't say you want to be healthier or lose the weight or do the thing and not expect that elements of it are uncomfortable. And it's like writing your tax bill. Like it's just, that's what it is, you know?
Totally. I think with all the best intentions, and maybe with not even any intentions at all, a lot of like, this is a term, you and I are, I guess, roughly the same age. So
I don't think, I feel like I'm a
well,
lot
how old
older
are
than you.
you?
I'm 50.
Is it polite for me to ask?
Yeah, I'm 54.
Did you stop aging like 20 years ago or something?
You know,
it's also not unbecoming to lie to people on public television.
Yeah, I
so
know.
I don't
Yeah, don't give me false compliments. You know, listen, I have a bunch of theories. I haven't been a drinker my whole adult life. Because I grew up in the Caribbean and everybody drank quite a bit. I have been in a very long relationship for almost 29 years. And I think there's an element to that has made, because it's energy. It's not really your,
must be a good relationship.
Yeah, but it's also like you can keep each other. I think when you love each other, whatever relationship, I think it feeds everybody. So I think there's a formula there that has made the process more positive for sure.
I love it. Yeah, you look, I mean, you get this all the time. I'm sure you look unreal. Okay, so you're a little older. This will make even more sense to you than it does for me.
It's because I have hair. You think that we're the same age, but anyway.
So do I. I mean,
isn't that a sign of high testosterone anyway?
Sure. That's the greatest compliment I ever got. Health nut. Remember that term from back in the day?
Oh, yeah.
Health nut.
Sure.
Really 80s, 90s kind of term. Yeah. And there are these people that buy into the health culture and fitness culture, which is great, right? But they're the ones that are like with wide eyes tell you about like the new vegan restaurant in town and how amazing it is. Like, don't lie to me. Don't know. In 1992, vegan food did not taste good. I won't have anyone lying to me about that. And so a lot of health nuts, I mean, these are the people that really drank the Kool-Aid and in the best way possible. But because maybe they're just instantly into health and fitness, they just were born for it, or because they were like so far removed from their difficult initiation phase that a lot of times when health nuts talk to people, and I see this in my daily life, they'll talk to regular people and they'll go, "Oh my God, you should start exercising. You're going to love it." I'm like, pause, Debbie, don't. You might love it later, but it's really awesome. It's great for you. You're going to have to just deal with it for a few sessions at least. Because if you tell people you're going to love it and they go to the gym, they're like, "Oh, Debbie says I'm going to love it. She's in great shape." You show up, you do an aerobics class with lifting involved. The instructor is screaming and she seems psychotic and possibly on cocaine, or does she just wake up like that? And then she's like, go, more reps, you, Susie, squat deeper. And you're doing all this stuff and you're like, this is torture. Yeah. I thought we beat the Nazis in World War II. This lady clearly escaped. What the hell is going on? Somebody lied to me. And it was Debbie the health nut. So that idea that like, hey, you're going to have to do adult things and get into this, and eventually it's going to be awesome, but at first it won't. I think it bears repeating because health nuts, and again, health nuts, no offense, we love you. We're one of you. But I think some people forget or never knew that most regular folks, including themselves back in the day, it's a tough road to get into the situation.
Yeah. And unless you have like a reason, like a sport or, you grew up in a family where you were sort of indoctrinated into it, I think it is a hard leap. Like if you didn't really participate in sports, I think then you get spit out into the real world. You're expected to work long days and then be like, oh, and speaking of learning, I'm just curious so you have this incredible app, in RP Strength, and there's a nutritional component and a exercise component, and people,
2 different apps.
Yeah. That's what we were talking. That's what I wanted to clarify.
2 separate apps.
Okay.
Yep.
So for people who, I think this is a really important thing. I think to start, this idea of creating a consistency obviously is king, but having a strategy. I think to blindly fall into it each day is impossible. I think either sitting down, following a program like yours, or a program that you feel reflects kind of what you think you can consistently do is important. And even, maybe writing down a plan is very important. I'm just curious for you personally, where you go to either get inspired, learn, whether it's about movement or food, if there's is sort of people or books that you really have enjoyed that have been adjuncts to what you already know and do.
That's a great question. I do learn from a ton of folks that are in the same industry that have different perspectives. So one person that comes instantly to mind is a gentleman named Menno Henselmans, and he's originally from the Netherlands. And he might be like the best looking person ever. I tell myself every day, I'm straight, I'm straight, I'm straight. Menno shows up and I'm like, my name's Mike, and hello, who are you? It's all I remember. I don't even remember my name. I'm like, hello. But he is incredibly well educated, incredibly articulate, and has a knack for explaining concepts really simply and really well. And so he has a YouTube channel. He is on Instagram and all this other stuff. He's a person that I just straight up learn from. And there's a ton of other people that I go to get my knowledge. Dr. Pack, Dr. Milo. If you Google any of these and type in lifting or resistance training or strength or muscle growth, it'll come up, and all their socials will come up. Jeff Nippert is really good on social media. He's mostly speaking to a crowd of folks that aren't quite as hardcore as the one we speak to. So it's a bit more of a general take. On general health stuff. Actually, the real, I call him the real Dr. Mike. Do you know who the real Dr. Mike is? Have you ever heard of him?
What do you mean, like a Gold's Gym guy?
No. Oh. So there is a gentleman on YouTube. So our YouTube has like 2.35 million subscribers.
Yeah.
He has like 12.5 million. His name is Dr. Mike. He's also a Russian Jew, go figure. And he is a board certified licensed medical doctor and also a professional boxer. Why not? So he's like the better, and he's taller and he's more handsome than me. Like you thought you were cool and then you met someone that's better at everything you do than you do it. You just like kick rocks on your way down the road. You hire someone to play a really sad saxophone theme for you. That's what I ended up doing when I met him. But he has an awesome podcast. He's on YouTube and he's on all podcasting platforms, and he is speaking to regular folks that are looking at their health, they're looking at their fitness, and they're going, I don't even know where to start. You just start listening to the Dr. Mike podcast, not me, the real Dr. Mike, and you'll get a ton out of it. And there's tons of other people I'm totally lapsing on right now. There's another great website for the nerdier folks called Stronger by Science. Phenomenal. But like, you got to be a bit of a nerd to get into that content real deep. Tons of other great folks. And I honestly learn from my colleagues more than I learn from, I do a lot of perusing of the literature. I do a lot of my own thinking. I talk to my colleagues at RP a ton, but those are the names that come to mind when I'm learning from other folks. Yeah.
I feel like with the kind of information, the fact that you went to school for these things and then put it also into an application like bodybuilding, because there is an exact science, right? You're tweaking and turning and getting things to a very precise point at a very precise time. Not unlike sports, but different because it's this one night, right? This one afternoon, versus, a football player, you're trying to peak. Maybe if you could do it, towards the beginning of the playoffs, avoid injury, all the other variables. I find, and tell me what you think about this, that because there's almost like an over practicality in a way, like you guys are so practical about things. So it's sort of like, okay, protein, fats, and carbs, calories, a certain amount of workload. And I do feel that there's other conversations, and ones I'm very interested in as well, around wellness. So it's, mitochondrial function and your metabolic health and inflammation and all these things. And I feel like in cases like yours, you guys are like, yeah, but you still kind of just go in this sort of very straight way to data, reps, calories, where in a way you're not almost distracted in the same way by some of the other kind of conversations around wellness.
Definitely. A lot of bodybuilding and fitness, maybe most of it at the competitive or obsessive level, has absolutely nothing to do with wellness whatsoever. People just look well, sort of, or at my level, they just look strange. And they tend to be healthy because they eat good foods, they exercise a lot, and they're very lean, which is like the three biggest pillars of health outside of like good social relations and good sleep, which they also typically get good sleep because they know that's a priority. Is just sort of accidentally find themselves in good health. I mean, myself included, I've been quite public about this. I mean, use of anabolic steroids that is absolutely not healthy and there's no illusions to any other effect. Like, yes, this is hurting me. And so that procedural nature that like we're going from here to here, we need these inputs to get these outputs. That's what keeps people occupied in bodybuilding. And the end goal is purely aesthetic for almost everyone. Like it's the look. I want the look. And many people will take years off their lives chasing the look. I mean, that's what professional bodybuilding is at the highest levels, even amateur bodybuilding. And so a lot of folks in the bodybuilding space, they're like, people will have conversations with them about wellness and they're like, yeah, that's good. That'll help me like gain more muscle, lose more fat. The foundation of having a great physique is being well, health wise, mental health, physical health. So like a lot of bodybuilders just are into wellness simply because it allows them to continue to do what they do, instead of they're in it just for their own situation. They're in it for the wellness itself. Like the wellness doesn't even enter their minds, but there is a big conversation outside of this crazy niche fitness industry situation of bodybuilding and physique competition, which is like, about more of I'm doing this for my health
Right.
and for my longevity. But I will have to say, so first of all, there's a ton of awesome stuff to say about that. I mean, so Dr. Peter Attia runs a great podcast almost exclusively about wellness, and like he's got way more listeners than almost anybody else. It's great that people are tuning in. Andrew Huberman runs a podcast, again, very much wellness oriented. It doesn't talk about like getting jacked and shredded a ton, and he's got huge audiences. So that's a good thing. But I will say, and I have a knack for saying this over and over, a lot of people who will tell you with a straight face they're into the wellness stuff really are into the aesthetics of it. And I think that as a culture, it's as a society, I don't know, as a society, it's a bit grandiose. I think I'll say this in a more simple way. It's probably a good thing for more of us than fewer of us to be okay with the fact that appearance matters for us. And that's okay. There are two perspectives on this that are like contrary to it. One comes from like the political right wing, which is like, your value to the community, your service is what matters. Don't be so self-involved. You're being narcissistic. And like there's a lot of truth to that too. And there's sort of like you shouldn't care about your appearance. You should care about serving, your family, the community, God, etc., which is all way more important than everything else for sure. And then from the political left wing, you're also told like, well, everyone's beautiful no matter what they look like. All bodies are beautiful. And so like when you're being really obsessive with how you look, like you're also buying into this fitness myth and this capitalist beauty myth. They just want to sell you products and no one really cares about you. And so from both sides of the political aisle, everyone's like, when people ask you, why do you lift weights? You got to tell them, oh, it's because I'm taking care of my health and I want to be strong. And you're not allowed to say, but people feel guilty about saying, I want to look good with no clothes or any clothes on. It is not the only priority. And yes, it is a little shallow, fine, but real humans want it and it means something to them. There's always a weirdness to, like, the girl that was always hot. You were probably that girl. Who the hell am I talking to? The girl that was always the hot girl. And, she finally like turns 30 and starts thinking a little bit more than about herself. And she gets on Instagram and she's still obscenely hot. And she's like, it doesn't matter what you look like. What matters is what's inside. Hey, Tracy, shut up. Shut up. You've never been unattractive. You've never considered yourself less than. You don't know how that feels. It's nice to tell ugly people, hey, you're beautiful no matter what. If you've been beautiful your whole life, that's all you ever know. But some of the rest of us, we want better. We want more. So a lot of people come into the fitness industry, geez, at that gym in New York City where Nick and I trained people, something like 95% of people would tell us they're in there for strength or health or because their wife or their doctor said it's time to lift weights. And then we designed programs for them initially. We didn't know that this was the reality, that were like programs like that, like, a bunch of cardiometabolic work, compound barbell supersets. And every single client, almost to the person, at some point was like, they get comfortable with you, like, so what about like my biceps? Like, what about my abs? And when we're like, so like with the butt, like, and we're like, oh, like aesthetics. And they're like, well, and you're like, listen, it's okay. Because if you work for aesthetics, you get all the health benefits anyway. It's okay to admit to yourself that you want to look good. It's totally fine. So while, yes, wellness is by far more important in the grand scheme than aesthetics, I think it's okay and better for us all to recognize it's okay to want to look your version of awesome.
I
Go get it.
I agree, because also there's days where, like, if that's what's going to get you in there, great. I always used to say with people, hey, you'll sleep better. You'll probably be nicer to your partner. But if me telling you your butt's going to look better is going to do it, great. Whatever it is, I think it's important. But I'm curious, you mentioned, being in a bodybuilding sport. I would think it's like a lot of sports. It's probably almost impossible, unless you're in the natural division, to compete without taking a steroid. What do you do as somebody who's so informed? Or do you do things while you're taking steroids to counter? Is there something to take or to do to counteract some of the negative impacts to your health?
Yes, absolutely. So one thing that a lot of people will take is blood pressure medication, because if you're on enough androgen, enough steroid, it, like, through a few mechanisms, increases your blood pressure. And chronically high blood pressure is just a super killer. Like, it'll get you. You can't feel it. You can get it with measurements. You can tell yourself, oh, it's only a little bit elevated. It is going to break every organ in your body given long enough time. That's just what it does. And so if you are taking steroids, you might as well be taking blood pressure drugs in order to counteract that effect. They have their own side effects, but they're very minor compared to years of chronic high blood pressure. So that's just one example. You can take other things to counter some of the cognitive effects. For example, some people, including myself, experience quite a bit of anxiety if they're on higher doses of steroids. So you can take CBD, for example, has some anxiolytic properties that are decently well vetted in the literature. So you end up taking a whole bunch of pills and a whole bunch of potions to do the main stuff that you want to do, and then to counteract the side effects. It's a big deal. And some folks who kind of got into the sport a little bit more ignorant, or just aren't the intellectual curious types, they'll get out of the sport in not by their own volition. They'll go to the emergency room one night and the doctor's like, this is your third heart attack. I don't know how to tell you that. I know you don't know about the other two, but your heart wouldn't look like this unless you had two other ones or something. And you're like, oh my God, who knew? And then, like, all of a sudden you can't do anything. And so it's really, really important to make sure that if you're taking very powerful drugs that are very bad for you, to manage the situation as much as possible. You don't race a top fuel dragster, and when you're putting the fuel in, you're just kind of pouring it all over the seat and the steering wheel, and some of it gets in. You're very, very particular, very careful. That is the only rational way to approach this very high risk activity.
So it feels like you've sort of said, hey, maybe going to start changing your relationship with competitive bodybuilding. You have businesses, you have a lot of things you're doing. I'm sure you're still going to train like a madman. But if there comes a point where you go, hey, I don't see competing in my future. You'll probably always be jacked. Do you cycle off altogether? Do you just tone it down? Like, what does that look like for somebody who kind of gets to this level?
You can do either one. If you cycle off, you have to do kind of post-cycle therapy, post-cycle management to make sure your natural testosterone levels kind of kick back in.
Mm-hmm.
For most people, they do. For some, they never do, and then they have to be on testosterone replacement therapy. I'm in a position personally where I am on TRT, and I will in the future kind of cycle back up to some lower doses and then cycle back down to TRT. I'm never going to do mega doses again. That was not fun, but I learned things. And so for me, I almost certainly will still compete in the future. It just like can't be in the next year or two because competing in bodybuilding is pretty intense and it takes a lot. And I love that. And I have no problem paying the costs. I have been doing that for years. But my demands, mostly in my work, are like, we have a whole company of people and equity partners. And if I'm like hobbying my way through bodybuilding instead of producing as much value as I can for them, I'm really ripping people off. And that does not sit well with me. So that's kind of why I sort of pivoted away from competition for a while. But now it's funny. I haven't really ever been a bodybuilder because I've just been training and eating and taking steroids this entire time to try to get as jacked as humanly possible in every capacity. Like forget balance and symmetry and all that stuff. I just never interested in it. Just trying to see how big can I get everything. That's the part of my life I'm done with. But now I'm actually right now training for aesthetics. So I'm purposefully detraining my legs because they were kind of absurd compared to the rest of me, purposefully training up my calves and my shoulders, my biceps, my forearms, my triceps, and a bit of upper chest and upper back to get like whatever my version with my genetics possible makes me more aesthetic and like cooler to look at from my own perspective. And because I built so much muscle, probably through at least to my mid 40s, I'm going to be able to get all of that muscle back at very low doses anytime I want. And I'm going to be able to build some new muscle by shifting away from training everything all the time to taking the gas off of some things and putting them into others. So my bodybuilding career, quote unquote, has been up to this point, just slap as much clay onto the sculpture as humanly possible. Now it's okay, let's start shaping the sculpture a little bit. So that's the big shift. Luckily, that does not require higher doses of steroids, which I'm done with because to me, the psychological side effects are just really unpleasant. And I'm just absolutely not interested in living my life like that anymore. So now you're talking to me. If you were talking to me 2 months ago, it would have been a little bit of a different vibe to the conversation. But now I'm on TRT and I feel this kind of pure joy all the time is a feeling I almost forgot what it felt like for the last kind of year and a half that I've been cranking away at it. So.
It's funny. I've heard you say, which I really appreciated, that not everybody, and obviously you have different goals, but not everybody needs TRT, that it's really important if people want to explore that route, getting their blood work done, even figuring out,
Yep.
is it something they need or want? Maybe they have a sufficient amount of testosterone and it's really just about organizing your food and your training. And so I sometimes think people think, oh, that would solve it, but they don't realize that there's probably a lot of ways to get what they want done without taking anything if they just sort of got dialed in those other aspects.
Oh God, yeah. I think TRT is getting a lot of press nowadays. Most of it's good press. But when something gets a lot of good press, you start to ask this question of, is this a solution for me? And you're trying to apply a solution before you found a problem. Like, is that something I should be doing? And it's like, well, hold on a second. Do you have a deficiency of testosterone? Question number one. Question number two is, do you have any symptoms of a deficiency of testosterone? Because, you could ask people like, listen, like, how's your sex drive? And they're like, honestly, annoying. Like, it's bad. Do not get on TRT. You are going to just ruin your life doing stupid stuff. So that's one of the many things in which you basically need two things to decide if you need to be on TRT. You need testing to confirm you have low testosterone levels and or at least more than one symptom of low testosterone. Because people will be like, yeah, like I'm just not feeling my workouts lately. TRT, right? I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Do you know there's like 10 other symptoms of low testosterone that the vast majority of people that have low testosterone have all of them or 8 out of 10 of them, and they're miserable. Hypogonadal living is just not for anyone to enjoy. And like, if that's you, like I had a friend who had low testosterone, a very close friend and colleague, and like he didn't always have it, but he got it kind of in his late 30s for no discernible reason, and like his life started falling apart, to be completely honest, not in any technical way, but like he just felt like all the time, like lifting was everything was and then he got on TRT, and I swear to God, it was a radical transformation. Like he just looked better, he felt better, everything was better. But he had medically low testosterone. The thing is, he was always, and all the way even through his phase of hypogonadal, like even through his low testosterone phase, he was always bigger, stronger, and more manly, and more sex drive inclined than anyone I've ever met. Maybe top 10 people I've ever met of just manhood. Like his nickname was Caveman back in the day. Like this is a guy that when you're in that, like that part of your when you're a young woman and you're in that part of your reproductive cycle, that you see him and you're like, that's what I need tonight. Come here. That's the guy. He was like that all the way through low test. He just felt like crap. It just recharged him completely. Yeah. So it's not just about what you look like. It's not just about the numbers on the medical screen of what testosterone is. It's a combination of all of those. Plus, do you meet all the criteria, or much of them? Lowered sex drive, poor ability to sleep, reduced levels of muscle mass, reduced levels of overall motivation. There's like 5 other things. If you check a bunch of those boxes and your test levels are low, TRT is very likely to change your life. It's just crazy for the better. But if you like had a bad week at work and your lifting didn't do that great, and you're like 42 years old and you're like, is it time to start TRT? Don't. Go to the doctor, get your blood work. The doctor's going to say, look, you're in the 90th percentile. And you're like, I'll just see myself out. And that's for the best.
It's really interesting how we allow outside narratives. Oh, I'm this age, so I'm that, and I do this and I'm that. I think people have to be really careful because you almost usher in the change, because you think, oh, now I'm this age, so this is probably what's going to happen to me. So I really appreciate that. The look, right? I interviewed a few years ago Chris Duffin. He's lifted a lot of weight multiple times, and
I know Chris very
and he
well,
said what was so hard for him was when you don't need that. You're not going to walk around with that, especially in his case where it is about a number of weight. It isn't bodybuilding per se. He said the hardest part, or one of the hardest parts, is transitioning to like, you're not the biggest guy. I wonder how you dance with that, because then it's always it is another form of an identity, right? It's like being an athlete and like you were that a thing, or it's like you have this thing. So where do you? Obviously, you have a lot of other things going on, but do you have to sort of keep that in check about, hey, I'm going to choose not to be as big as I've been because I'm doing it a little differently. I'm balancing it out. Do you have a come to Jesus with yourself on that, or is it easy for you?
It's a great question. I have pushed my size for my height and bone structure so far that I got past inconvenient all the way to medically not a good idea, all the way to I can't do bulking phases anymore because I'd have to start sleeping with a machine to help me breathe. And so I'm like 8 steps ahead of something that I would consider like jacked. And so for me, the deflating a little bit at least is like, oh my God, thank God. Like sleeping, I'm already sleeping better. I'm only down like barely any weight at all, but even just on fewer steroids, I'm sleeping better. My mood is better. And is there some gnarliness to just being nasty and that guy? Yeah, for sure. But for me, it's not super difficult to walk away from it because I have some really cool stuff to walk towards, like literally feeling better every day, which is sweet. Some guys don't feel that. Some guys get ultra jacked and they never really feel that bad. And then when they get smaller, they never really feel that much better. So there's only something missing. They didn't gain anything back. That I can sympathize with must be real, real tough. The other tough thing is like, you can look jacked for a long time. You can stay shredded into your 70s. Keeping your peak strength, and because strength is so objective, that's tough. The best powerlifters in the world, when they cross over 35, 40 years old, they have to be like, I have to choose a different hobby unless I just want to continue to get weaker over the next few years. That has to be really tough. But the jackedness part is another thing that makes my specific situation a little bit easier is I kind of, and I'm big on this in a lot of different respects. When you've got something that you like and it's good, but you know it can't last forever, you got to drink from that cup until you're sick of it. And then when it's gone, you're going to be like, I lived that life, like TLDR, but, I'm married and have been for years. And, is there a part of the married man's psyche that like, dude, I could be out there just making it rain? Yes. But if you've never drank from that cup a lot, you feel like you missed out. Luckily, I drank plenty from that cup. And one of the reasons I got married or into serious relationships with girls was like, I can't do no more hookups, no more, no, because, it comes with a lot of stuff, right? And it's not all fun and games. And like, you get the doughy eyes. What are we? And you're like, I believe your name was Stacy. Yes, that's what we are, Mike and Stacy. And so like, but if you can't tell someone that has never experienced, attention from women on a large scale that like, oh, you don't need it. Like, shut up. Yes, I do need it. In just the same way with muscle size, I have appraised and swam in this sea of being so jacked that I can't move my neck for so long. Like I've had plenty of it. And so it's easier for me to move away from it. And so when I see other jack dudes, I'm like, oh man, I wish I could have that back. I'm like, hey, I used to do that. And you talk to them and now they all know who I am because I'm Dr. Mike or whatever. But like, it's like, that was such a cool journey. And I loved that journey. But like, I don't want to do this forever because there's so many other beautiful things to do in life. But if you never really appraised your situation as, man, I'm really doing this and I'm aware of it and I'm really loving it and really letting your ego soak in it, I can understand why it's really hard to give up. I mean, imagine that you're really into wealth, but not wealth just for accruing wealth, but like you like fine dining, you like, first class flights, you like the best clothes, and you've been working at this finance career for a decade, scrimping and saving. And all of a sudden you're like getting ready to spend this money. And then someone's like, hey, there's been a technical problem at your trading firm. You actually don't have any money. What a disaster. But if you've lived the rich guy lifestyle long enough, if the money's gone, at the very least, you're like, well, that was cool. Someone's like, do you miss first class flying? You're like, yeah, but I've done it so many times. I don't even miss it. It's just like kind of, you do something enough and you're like, cool. So, people that were really jacked that just wanted to be more jacked and never stopped to appreciate how awesome they looked, they're going to have a real problem giving it up. Yeah. People that have lived that life and really soaked in it sometimes can get so much of it that they're like, this is cool. Like a lot of people love having children and raising children, but like you raise a few children to 18 and you're like, you look at your husband, you're like, more children? Do you want to adopt? And he's like, no. And you're like, me neither. No. Yeah. Like life works in phases. And if you can really soak up the phase, you're good to go. Sorry, real quick, one analogy offhand. Some people have children, but they're away at work a lot. Yeah. They're in the military. They miss a lot of stuff. It's understandable for them to be like, dude, it's so painful to see my kids grow up. Like, well, it's because you weren't around. Yeah. But if you're around a lot and you absorb it, you're like, hey, do you want kids that are 6 years old again? You're like, sorry, it was wonderful, but I'm glad it's over.
Yeah, I agree with that. I heard a quote I always loved is, don't be sad it's over, just be grateful that it ever occurred. And I think sometimes, whether it's sports or a certain, like you said, position, I think taking that in. I don't want to ramble too much longer. I do have to ask you, you're somebody who went to school to be educated about nutrition and performance and exercise. Online now, I learned how to observe things without attaching a ton of like generated emotion.
Feelings.
Yeah, I just try to stay a little more objective. When you see all these, and I put it in quotes, kind of exercise or nutrition influencers. Do you think that this is what's, on one hand, maybe it's motivating some people that wouldn't have gotten motivated, or do you think it's confusing things and muddling it up a little bit more for people who are already trying to navigate a pretty hard area, which is trying to figure out how to fit in and, again, taking care of themselves and what to eat?
It's definitely a very rich area of conversation because on the one hand, wouldn't it be great if everyone kind of said the right stuff and didn't say stupid stuff and have millions of followers believing stupid stuff? 100%. On the other hand, there's no magic wand for us to wave to magically make everyone know everything that the top researchers know or something like that. And so we live in the real world where there's a diversity of opinions. And what I always bring it back to is because we neither can control nor do we want to control, like, can you imagine the US government starts to regulate what you're allowed to say about fitness on the internet? I mean, my God, like, just move to communist China while you're at it. Like, good, sweet, forget freedom. No, thanks. But it comes back to the individual who is looking stuff up online to behave like an adult and, like you, to appraise things in a more objective manner, to look at everything anyone ever says and go, that's interesting. I wonder if that's true. And then look at what someone else says and go, that's interesting. I wonder if that's true. I wonder how it compares to this thing this other person says. When you start to follow 10 or 20 fitness influencers on your Instagram feed or on your YouTube algorithm, and the stuff that they agree on 90% is probably a good bet to do. The stuff that there was really tons of contention about between them, you can roll the dice however you want on that, but it's probably the minor details. If you just hook, line, and sinker follow one fitness influencer and just get all your information from them, there is a very decent chance you just picked right and you just have the simplest thing in the world of just one source, one knowledge, one act, and you're good to go. There's also a very decent chance that you picked the wrong person and you're just like getting lies spilled into you, and you just 5 years later you're going to need to unlearn all the stupid crap that they taught you. It's turned out with lies on top of lies. I say this all the time. Some people will say, like, oh my God, I get all my fitness information from you. I'm like, don't do that. I could be wrong about tons of stuff. I could be wrong about all of it for all I know. Now, I happen to not try to lie to people very often. I'm not trying. There's no scam. There's no scam at RP. We're just trying to help people get in shape. We're trying to get ourselves in shape. So we have a huge incentive to, like, just be able to learn the truth about how things work. But everyone makes mistakes. So I don't have a huge problem with fitness influencers. As individuals, some of them are just pure scum. Some are straight up sociopaths. And, any successful realm of anything is going to, like, chief executive officers of top 500 companies. Like, how many of them are like evil people? Like, yes, quite a bit. How many of them are great? Oh, quite a bit, right? All humans are diverse. And what I do have a problem with is people who get into camps. There are people who, we all have an ingrained evolutionary trend towards in-group, out-group, my team, their team. It's a thing, right? You cheer for your home team, you hate the other team. Some people take that into information where they're like, fitness information is like what you can do to build your body better and get healthier. That's not the time to let that instinct go. Just go to your kid's high school football team and yell about how that other team sucks. That's great. It doesn't hurt anyone. Everyone's having a good time. For fitness, don't just pick one or two influencers and just be like, everyone else is stupid and wrong and this person's like a saint. Don't do that. Don't do that. Step back, listen to everyone, figure out what makes sense for you, see how you can red team it and be like, does that really make sense? What about this criticism? Over time, you're going to develop an understanding of like, oh, okay, I think I know what I'm doing a little bit. And I agree mostly with these people, but not wholly. Like I listen to a lot of podcasts and YouTube videos by military bloggers, just like a hobby of mine, and economists. And I'll have people who, like, if I ever met in real life, I would like hyperventilate. I'd be super nervous to meet because I look up to them so much. But when I listen to their podcasts, I'll like be like, yep, preach that word. And then they'll say something. I'm like, that's not true. But I used to like pain me because of like my hero has fallen from perfection. Now it doesn't pain me at all. I'm like, yeah, so we can't all get it right 100% of the time, but like 95% is damn good.
Yeah.
So I'm listening to this person. And when they say stuff that's just nonsense, I'm like, yes, we all say nonsense. I say nonsense all the time. So it's not the influencers that bother me. It's that people's need for like this, like, one person that I follow and everyone else is wrong. If that's you, yeah, you might stumble into someone who tells you a lot of stuff that's just not true. And then you'll labor for years with very not so great results. And someone will tell you, hey, calories do matter. And you're like, but my fitness influencer says it's some magic foods that'll help cure inflammation that matter. And like, have you gotten into shape yet? You're like, no, but it's because the fast food industry. And like, well, try calorie balance. And a year later, you're like, oh, I lost 27 pounds and my blood work's incredible. I feel so stupid. Real quick, one last final rant. Not just fitness influencers, but fitness trends. Do not be one of these people that hops full send into a fitness trend. You may regret it. I've been alive long enough now, and you are certainly in this perspective where, do you remember, okay, so you remember 87s when you started lifting. Do you remember that like, if you were a health conscious person and someone saw you eat any saturated fat, they were like, oh, you're trying to like end it all, right? You just don't care about your life. Then it got to the point where like any amount of olive oil you could drink, you were just like adding health and years to your life. And then like, wheatgrass shots. And then there was the coconut oil situation, coconut butter. You just put it on everything. It heals you. And then low carb and then keto and then Atkins and then South Beach. And there were people in each one of these camps that were like vampire teeth adherents. They were like, yes, keto is the best. And now more recently, the carnivore diet, people are like, I'm carnivore for life, man. And this one guy, I think his name is, what is his name? Saladino.
Paul Saladino.
Paul Saladino. He was like super carnivore. Yeah. And then now he's not. Honey, he was telling people broccoli's like poison. And now he's like, I was wrong.
Bullshit.
Right. And it's like, well, man, it's first of all personally embarrassing for him to have like led a lot of people into what he now considers as the wrong diet. But, we all go through our weird stuff. I'm sure he'll be fine. As a person, as a consumer of fitness information, you can try diets for sure. But the way I would try them is be like, I'm trying carnivore and I think it might be working. We'll see. And if I try a different diet later, it's not my identity that's at risk. I'm just trying different stuff. And over time, I'm going to learn stuff. Don't be a person that's like, this is my fitness influencer and this is my diet, unless it's RP. And then we welcome all cultists. We will give you a special hat to wear. We have a whole center. You'll drink Kool-Aid. It's amazing.
One thing you said that I really appreciated and wanted to highlight was you were talking about carbohydrates and that, maybe pick ones that are lower on the glycemic index. But as far as performance, this is so important. So, you can do certain things to lean out, but if you're eating for performance, that, we can't ignore carbohydrates.
People try, and some people really feel better on low carb, but feel better and perform better are two different things.
Yes.
And the question I like to ask people that are pretty adherent to the low carb thing is, if aliens pointed a phaser gun at Earth and you had to do your best performance in insert athletic event here, would you eat carbs in the few days before or not? Please don't kill us all. Please eat some. But at some point that brings it back into perspective of they're like, well, okay, yes, in that case I would, because the research is too hard to ignore. And yes, I do perform better, but I don't love eating carbs and they make my blood sugar all wacky and it doesn't make me feel good. And listen, facts. Listen, some people, they just lower carb fits better for them. I've done lower carb diets before and I felt fantastic on them. But performance is a technical thing. It can be measured and you gotta do it. Hey, funny enough, this is, I suppose sort of related. If I ever fly to Europe for work, inevitably you just don't sleep the same way on a flight as you do at home. And then you get there and it's like, I had like 3 hours of sleep on the flight and it's 6 a.m. So the day is beginning. Towards the end of a day with sleep deprivation, feel fantastic. Like, I'm literally high. I love it. Everything kind of seems a little trippy and weird. I'm a little slow. I'm super giggly. Everything's incredible. I love it. Food tastes better. The whole thing. I love feeling sleep deprived. Crazy, right? I love it. It's my favorite thing. I'm not performing better in any capacity when I'm sleep deprived. I'm not stronger. I'm not faster. I'm mentally slower. I look worse. The whole thing. I like it, but it's not the thing that gets me the highest performance. The same can be applied with a ton of stuff, including low carb, high carb, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I just wanted to make that because I think people have to recognize like the kind of cosmetic and then performance. Breathing, I won't get into like how you like to breathe, but if someone is lifting and for you in your experience, because I won't say one of the, well, I will say this. I took a class years ago and this woman was talking about how in yoga, like sometimes they get in these positions and that's when they exhale, but that's actually when you should be inhaling because it would protect your joints and it would just set you up in a better position. You may not be as quote flexible, right? Because you'd be inhaling and doing it, but maybe in the
Correct.
overall structure, you'd be more protected. So just to be very clear for people, because as they're either in their journey or going to sort of be inspired by you and say, I'm going to ramp up what I'm doing, or that's it, I'm going to start. On principles, short of sprinting, generally, how do you like to breathe when you're lifting?
Typically in and out. I'm kidding. Wouldn't that be amazing if I
I
just
was going to
stopped
say,
after that?
he's like, actually, Gabby, out of my anus. No.
No, I do a lot of that kind of breathing. You know what I mean? Mostly out. I'm kidding. I'll drop that joke. There's lots more jokes that'll just get the show canceled.
Okay.
So a good dependable way to breathe in lifting is to remember an easy principle. When you are in the most difficult, often bottom portion of the lift, when your muscles have the most stretch to them and the most tension, is when you want to have a nice big tummy full of air. Like that, bear down. You have something there to someone. If you breathe in and then flex your abs, someone should be able to punch you a little bit in there. And I was like, wow, that feels really solid and tight. It keeps your spinal column really straight. And through the nervous system, it communicates to the rest of your body that, hey, like we're straight, we're solid, we're not fickle. And then it actually makes you able to lift more weight and do more reps. So typically the way, based on the principle of when I'm in my most difficult position, I have a nice tummy and lungs full of air. What you do is at the top of a repetition, like in the squat, you have the squat bar on your back. You look forward, breathe in, hold your breath, squat down, squat up, and halfway up when you're almost to the top, breathe out. Breathe in at the top, hold your breath, go down, come up, and repeat. Don't like overdo it because you couldn't pass out if you're not used to this sort of thing. You're like, don't do that. Just gently breathe in, bear down a little bit, squat up, squat down. On the bench press, breathe in at the top, bench down, bench up, up. Basically, when the bar reaches that halfway point, you can start to breathe out. There are other ways to breathe that are totally cool as well. And if you're listening to this and you're like, Jesus Christ, of course there's a special way to breathe too. These people are insane. They have rules for everything. Just breathe normally and you're going to be 100% fine. But if you want that extra little bit of, then yeah, holding your breath at the bottom of the lift with a nice solid thick rib cage full of air, that's really going to get the job done.
Yeah, I just wanted to reemphasize that because sometimes, people, I almost feel like they'll work the opposite. And I just want to remind them that within the breath, obviously, is all this protection. Okay, so finally, and I didn't get too nuts and bolts with you because I feel like there is a lot of that online. So I want to remind people You have so many nuts and bolts, whether you will go to your own YouTube show or I heard you on Modern Wisdom before. I mean, you yourself put out so much content. So if people want to get granular on building muscle and training, and plus even the app. So I will ask you though, Dr. Crystal.
Yes, I've heard of her.
When I think about when you talk about being on steroids and moods and things like that, what was Dr. Crystal able to do, your wife, to hold space for you? She obviously has her own thing going on in her own life, but what's the art of her sort of being able to hold that space for you while you were probably in your own, journey. Cause that's what happens when you're in a couple, right? One person sometimes is going through certain things. Another is going through, one's up, one's down. Is there some way or technique that she must possess to be able to hold that space for you?
That's a way better question for her than it is for me. If you ever want to ask her that, she could tell you quite a bit, I'm sure. I would be speculating a little bit
Okay.
because I can't speak for her directly. But when I'm going through a tough time, I believe I've never once raised my voice at her, ever. I don't know if I've ever raised my voice at anyone except for my parents, but God, mom and dad sure can get under the skin like nobody. And so I have a rule for myself that no matter what I'm going through in my head, my first principle is civility at all times. I never let it spill out. So the way that presents to her is I'm usually chatty and open. I wear all of my emotions on my face, and I would just look more kind of stoic, more cold, sometimes like homicidal looking. But I'm Russian and I have Russian face. Do you know what Russia face is? Like Russians will pose for a picture with family and they look like this. That's what they look like. And so my dad has tons of pictures of himself. I'm like, are you pissed? He's like, no. I'm like, oh, you just look like this. So I just put the Russia face on a lot. And that normally I'm chatty and stuff, but I just be quieter because everything my brain bubbles up to be like, say this is a terrible, hateful thing I don't actually mean. And like, that's where all that nastiness is coming from. So she'd have to deal with a version of me that was way more intense and way more quiet. And, I think if I'm speculating on her behalf, and we've talked about this a little bit, though we're just kind of unpacking a lot of this now, is I think probably one of her better weapons was the understanding that this was not forever. This was temporary. She's used to me being on normal ground. She's used to me being in that other mood of super steroid, super focused mood. And she knows how much fun I can be and how much she likes me in the regular me mood. And it was a thing of just like, hey, this is going to be over soon. She's very business minded, very oriented, one of the most conscientious people I've ever met. And she's incredibly like, just career oriented, and she can grit her teeth and get through shit. And I've never seen anyone get through. Like, she moves mountains. And so to her, I think the way she approached it was like, this is just another thing for me to just suck up and deal with while it's happening. She knows what she signed up for too. We had very frank discussions very early in our relationship of like, this is what I'm going to be doing. It actually started with her she told me, like, she's like, if you think I'm going to get to be like a skinny mini, it's not in the cards. And it's not private. I've said this before. I like them thick. So I was like, girl, are you out of your mind? I get that skinny nonsense out of my face. But luckily we're really compatible, but we have some boundaries and some expectations that we kind of know what we're getting into. I think it's maybe a little bit tragic when people get married to someone and they like kind of hope they'll change for the better. But people on average just don't change. Like, they do sometimes, but if you just, my best advice for marriage happiness is, on the day of your wedding or the couple days before, if this person's all of their bad qualities exactly the same and all their good qualities exactly the same, do you find yourself with them 30 years from now? If the answer is yes, hey, you're going to have a great time. If the answer is no, do not sign that contract. Do not go to the courthouse. You got to rethink some stuff. So Crystal knew what she was getting into. And I think for her, the big thing was just waiting it out, it out. And, another one of the main reasons that I gave up the competing for now and the high steroids for forever is like, I'm just not doing that to her anymore. Like, and it's not, she never complained about it a single time. She's a warrior, but like, I'm just not interested in being that person around anyone anymore, really. And so for her, I think it was one of these things where if it was permanently the way I was, we've had a conversation where I was like, if this is just how I was, I would divorce you so that you didn't have to divorce me. Like, there's no one should be around me like this. And she would tell me many times, she's like, hey, listen, I'm with you all the way through. And so her coping strategy was just kind of dealing with it. And, to be honest, it's actually, I just transitioned down to my TRT dose like a week ago from an intermediate dose from very high doses. And she honestly told me a few days ago, she's like, this is weird. And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, it's honestly, I've gotten used to you being intense, Mike, for so long. It's like throwing me off to like sort of remember you like this before, but not really. She's like, you know, when someone's like focused and then all of a sudden like, hey, how are you doing? Can I get you something? Have you been fed? Can I cook you a meal? You're like, what the hell? What's the upside? What's the con here? She's dealing with that right now. So
I understand that. I went through that differently with my husband. My husband is very intense for different reasons. I'm so grateful. I love that he's intense. But in the earlier part of our marriage, he did drink alcohol. And also, I will say, time, wisdom, maturity, these things also impact us, right? And there are days where I look at him and I think, oh, this is such a different version of this same person. And I have to say this, what it does is it only makes you appreciate your partner more.
Sure.
Like that's all she's experiencing also is like, oh, I also, you know, am appreciating this. So are you going to be able to deal with, because your persona online is, you're a little bit of a poker and, and part of that breaking through and penetrating in the internet and why you've done so well besides your body of work is that you say things in a way that people, you might get a reaction. And was that a new skill you had to learn when people kind of, I'm sure you get, more of like, you're jacked, you're ripped, I love you. But when you get people who, they want to be upset.
I've heard that last one ever.
They want to be upset. Is it like, water off a duck's back, like no problem? Or have you had to learn how to manage that too?
Learn the managing criticism part, or learn how to be the critical
because
person?
as you grow and you're more successful in RP strength is more successful, and all of it is sort of building and growing. Part of that is going to be, people who, that's just the nature of the beast. So you're probably not somebody who started out thinking, oh, I'm going to have a really public element to my job. And now that is the case. Is that like something you've just learned through time, or are you just like, who cares?
Learn through time. I don't like to be a controversial person necessarily. I take that back. I have no problem.
I was like, what are you talking about?
I have no problem being controversial. I don't like to be a person that says mean things about others. But some people, like, so for example, Liver King.
Oh,
Liver King is an insane liar.
He kind of did that to himself, though.
100%. And so, like, I'm not going to, like, put the kid gloves on for that. There's enough lying out there where I'll just call it out straight up. I'll be like, no, bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. You can't possibly believe this. You're a hypocrite. And I think it's important for people to speak truth to power. Like, journalists do that thankless job every day, right? Like,
well, they used to
publish an article about someone.
They used to.
They used to, right? Nowadays, it's just all political lines, right? So I that part of my job I do out of a feeling of, if I don't do it, who the hell's going to do it? Right? Like, I can't stand by and watch people con people. One of the reasons Nick and I started RP was because we had so many amazing people in our lives as our clients and people we were around helping with fitness that were smart. They're smart, like Dartmouth graduates and Harvard grads, like New York, Manhattan's, Midtown's finest, right? Working at all the big firms. And they were just wonderful people that were super smart. They were just getting ripped off left and right with fitness scams. And Nick and I were like, no more. We're going to put out what we think is the best truth to help people. And if we have to call out others who aren't doing it, no problem. I don't like that part of the work. I don't like it at all. the criticizing Hollywood videos, they're really fun. And honestly, when you have $100 million in the bank account, you can take some fucking criticism.
Yeah.
I don't care. Like, whatever. And they don't even, real celebrities don't pay attention to anything anyway. But it's one of those things where I did get a lot of joy out of being critical. I'm much more naturally kind of a jovial, jokey person. So if you watch like our Friday show on YouTube of Exercise Scientist Critiques, it's much more now a positive kind of thing with some self-deprecating humor rather than like getting at people. But we do have on the docket to address some online doctors, Dr. Axe, Dr. Gundry, Dr. Berg. They're on the list and they will be addressed with some nuance, but they're just people that say lies a lot and don't care about it, seemingly. And so they got it coming. For everyone else, like I'll critique bodybuilders and stuff, but they're so accomplished and they're so great. And I want to keep the positivity going personally for me, because I just can't be negative too long until I just feel like crap. And also for everyone, for the world, like everyone in the world, whoever watches our stuff, like I want them to be like, this is great to listen to. I don't feel icky. So a lot of times I'll be like, this is an interesting way of them doing stuff. It has a couple of detractions, but for everyone has a different body and some stuff works for them. For you folks at home, maybe you can try this other way and this way and see what you like best. I like that much better. And then, so that's how I've kind of been evolving as a purveyor of content, as a producer of content. I'm trending more towards positivity, but I'm not going to drop the sword of skepticism on like charlatan doctors or scam artist fitness influencers. That ain't happening, like over my dead body, right? On the other hand, criticism wise, I've done something recently where it's just really helpful. I just pretty much stopped reading all comments. Like, so anyone ever hears this, you comment on my post, so there's a high probability I'll just never see it. Why? Because I can layer any explanation I want into this. One of them is because I'm Russian and we have a knack for this sort of thing. I have a profound sense of you. Maybe it's old school. You don't say stuff to someone online that you wouldn't say in person. I've never done that. I'm totally comfortable saying whatever the hell I said to someone online right to their face. It doesn't make me manly or tough. It's just like, that's how communication worked. Like, it doesn't matter what modality is, it's still you saying it. There are lots of people on the internet, trolls and comment comedians and stuff, that's absolutely not the case with them. There's a hilarious interaction between kind of a UFC legend, Paul Felder, just an amazing fighter, who I saw spar once at the gym, and he hit the heavy bag so hard it like ricocheted through my bones. And I was like, how do people get kicked by this man? And this one guy, it was an amazing screenshot of an interaction online where this guy's like, dude, Paul Felder's shit. He's washed up. He's nonsense. He shouldn't be fighting in the UFC. And Paul Felder goes, I wonder if you would say that to me in real life. And the guy goes, absolutely not. You'd beat the crap out of me. And Paul Felder goes, fair enough. It's like one of the funniest interactions I've ever seen. But that kind of like, why would you say all those things if you can't like get up out of your chair and say it to the real person? It's baffling. And my Russian psychotic steroid fueled brain, especially when I'm in that mode and on lots of gear, which thank God I'm not going to be anymore. When I read comments that are trying to personally offend me, like succeeds. And I'm like, I want to find this person in real life and see if if in real life we get it popping and they break my arm or I tap or something or they knock me out, total respect. You got me. That's how, I've been in combat sports for a long time now. I don't have any problem getting busy. Sweet. If I've lost tons of times, it doesn't matter. There's an honor in losing to someone who punked you out. And they said, like, I won, you lost. And you're like, totally. But for that never to happen and them still be talking shit, it was like, I have deep feelings of vengeance, like I've been wronged. And it's all total nonsense because most of these people are 15 and they're doing this as a joke because to them, you're not a real person. You're a fitness influencer. You're like in this ethereal world of like, that's not a real human being. And if I've never, single time in my fitness industry career, have anyone ever said anything unkind to my face, not a single time. I've actually seen people who I know talk smack about myself and my partner in crime, Jared Feather, who's a pro bodybuilder. They talk smack about us online all the time. And then we were at the Arnold Schwarzenegger Classic in Columbus, Ohio, big fitness expo together. Jared and I, we were instructing people on how to lift weights. And Jared goes, you see those guys walking over there? There was those guys talking shit. And we looked over at them and those guys are looking at the ground the entire time. Like, why are you looking at the ground now, man? There's your time to come up to talk some shit. They didn't do that, right? So I have to adjust my stupid Russian vengeance brain to be like, okay, none of this is real. And now that I'm on lower doses, logically I can always process this, but the feelings just don't come as hard anymore. Where like a lot of times when people make fun of me online, I'm like, well, that's actually pretty funny, first. And second of all, like, they're not wrong. Like, yeah, like I probably did overplay my hand on this concept, or I probably was wrong in this situation. The kind of the way they say it, if I'm on megadose Mike, then I'm like, I just take it all wrong. So the best medicine for me was just stop reading the comments as much, or just don't read them at all.
Yeah.
Would I like to be the kind of person that can go through comments and interact with the great people? Because there's tons of them. That's most people. But like, just let the stuff kind of fall off. Yes, I'm more and more that person every day. Is it a marginally good use of my time to be in comment sections? Probably not. This is a thing about being an influencer, not to get all self-aggrandizing here, but like when you have like 700,000 Instagram followers, you can't really try to have a conversation with a stadium full of people at the same time. Can you imagine someone like, former President Barack Obama, like speaking to 3,000 people and having a conversation with people in the crowd, but they all comment at the same time, right? So everyone's yelling and he's like trying to, it's just not humans weren't designed for that kind of interaction. So for me, my best thing that I've done was take Joe Rogan's advice to the world.
Yeah.
Whereas what is it? Never read the comments section.
And ghost and post and ghost, right? Like just
post
put
and
it
ghost.
And split. Well,
totally.
And that's why your real life, your real relationships, those are the ones, the most important. So can we talk about one last thing, which is, because in my house, obviously the obvious things, right? We avoid processed foods. I try to have high quality animal protein if I can order it, I have friends that are hunters, all of it, right? The conversation around, and I know you're going to cringe and I'm sorry, but I have to bring it up because I want to talk to you about it, is seed oils. Now, is it, they're in the processed food, so that's why they have a bad rap. If the French fries from the fast food place has got a million other things and they're, tons of calories, but I guess there are so many people that are really, Dr. Kate Shanahan wanting to talk about the hateful eight, like all of these things. Is it whether because they've been heated up and cooled down, oxidized? Because I know for you, it's like, it doesn't matter. And I've heard that from a lot of people actually that have like a similar background to you.
Great question. My big thing on seed oils is when you look at the direct randomized control trials, like some group of people eat not seed oils. Some group of people, they eat the same calories, same everything. It's just replaced with seed oils for that portion of their fat intake. There are lots of these studies. Some of these studies are industry funded. Some of these studies are university funded. Some of these studies are privately funded. In essentially all of the studies, seed oils are usually healthier than saturated fat alternatives, and at worst have no impact on health that's negative. So if you were going to tell me that seed oils were bad for you and I didn't know any better, I would be very curious. And you say they're industrially processed, and I'd be like, oh boy, I know a lot of foods like that and it's just not good for your health. If I was a scientifically minded person, I would be like, is there like a literature review you can send me, like a systematic review of literature that shows kind of all the studies together and says like, hey, here's why seed oils are bad, or maybe we don't know, but here's all the data showing that they're bad. Gabby, that literature review does not exist. As a matter of fact, several reviews do exist, and they all say the same thing. Seed oils are quite good for your health and better for your health usually than alternative methods of fat ingestion. So when the critical element of in real life, in scientific, direct experimental studies, when something fails to show a negative effect and usually shows positive, as scientifically minded people, we got to be like, this is kind of a little bit of a big problem. Let me give you one homology and one analogy. The homology is diet soda. People will tell you till they're blue in the face that it's bad for you. You go to the direct empirical literature and every study's like, it's great, it's totally fine, it's great, no effect. It actually helps you lose fat because it kills your sugar cravings, but it has no calories. And you're like left thinking like, so why do people say it's bad again? Is it just vibes? Is it just inference? And look, inference is great when you have nothing else to go on. But like when the direct data in dozens of studies say like this is actually quite fine, you gotta feel a little bit like, what, so hold on a second, like how is this happening? Why are people saying this? I I want to be convinced, but I'm just having a hard time swallowing the pill, because I want to believe. I'm not like paid by big seed oil or something like that, though that would be sweet. I'm still like, every time I tell them I want money, they just never return my emails. If something is bad for your health, like trans fats are not good for your health, and the literature is pretty clear on that. So you just generally tell people kind of stay away from trans fats. I'll spare the analogy, was going to be another sidewinder to the conversation, but basically, like the diet soda example is so similar to the seed oils example that people are yelling about it till they're blue in the face, and you're like, where's the data? And I don't mean that in a, well, I know diet soda's not bad for you, so I know where's the data is an impossible ask. As an open-minded person who wants to learn, where's the data on this? And some of the folks that do the mechanistic implication stuff, the heated, reheated stuff, and all the alterations at the molecular level, if that was true, that it would cause harmful health effects, wouldn't we see it directly in the studies? Fine. Okay, fine. This is where the analogy comes in handy. So let's say you have, let's say one of your friends is like, dude, I know a guy that can squat 2,000 pounds. And you're like, get out. You're like, no joke. And she sends you a picture of him and his legs are just atrociously massive, right? And you're like, whoa. And they're like, isn't that crazy? Skeptical part of you would be like, so where's the video? And they're like, well, he doesn't like to video himself. And your eyebrows start to do one of these where you're like, And then maybe like, you're like, okay, I don't need 2,000 pounds. You know, we all miss a big lift video every now and again, like that one lift that the phone didn't hit play or record or whatever. Fine. Can I get you squatting 1,200 pounds, 1,500? I mean, that's so far away from the 2,000 you claim. It should be pedestrian for you. Still nothing. Weird, right? Weird. Like there's Vlad Dukul. He was like a circus strongman back in the Soviet days. He claimed to be like the strongest man by a mile. Never entered a sanctioned lifting competition. Weird. He broke tons of world records with his own weights. Oh, on camera, sure, but they weren't validated weights. It's like, if you really want to tell me something that you really want me to believe, I want to believe. I do. But I'm going to need something. And when almost all the studies say it's totally fine for health, and then the background literature says like, well, typically monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats are better for health on average than saturated fats, you're kind of left wondering like, okay, so what is the seed oil stuff? Now, the heating, reheating stuff, that's not something that happens to all seed oils. That happens to French fry grease. And that's also probably not why French fry grease is bad for you. There's probably nothing really wrong with peanut oil in pretty high quantities. What's wrong is it's your fifth plate of fries and you can't stop eating fries. It's just too many calories. They don't use seed oils in most cakes and cookies, but people get really fat off cakes and cookies. And I remember I was shopping, and I tell a story all the time, so forgive me if you heard it before, but I used to go to Whole Foods just because it was close by, and I was like, ooh, snack time, let me get a little fun cheat meal going. I would buy a vegan brownie with no artificial ingredients whatsoever, and it was so delicious. But it was like 1,000 calories, like the size of my head. It was amazing. I'd have one whole one. I wanted two. I can just imagine there's tons of people out there buying this thing because like, it's healthy. Well, anything eaten in excess is unhealthy. And if something's so damn tasty and calorie dense that eating it in excess is as easy as breathing, you're going to have a bad time with it 9 times out of 10. That's the real story with seed oils. People who say don't eat seed oils anymore, they're not the people whose experiences of seed oils is, I get a plate of broccoli, of some whole grain pasta, a lean strip of salmon, and then I pour a little bit of canola oil on the pasta. That's not what they were doing. They were eating junk food and fast food and junk food and fast food. And they're like, it's the seed oils. I wish. Listen, if anyone out there can prove to me that if I can eat tons of junk food that wasn't made with seed oils, but was made with other oils or other fats, and it won't be bad for my health and make me fat and miserable, I got $1 billion for you in the food industry. Can you imagine? You go to a burger joint, fast food place, You're dipping your fries into ketchup and mayo. You got the double, triple cheeseburger, and you walk out of there. You step on the scale 2 days later. You lost weight. You're like, what? And they're like, no seed oil. See? And you're like, you go to your doctor, you get your blood work. They're like, the blood work is the best, is greater than it's ever been. And you're like, like, if that was true, holy crap, Gabby, I'd be the first one in line. I just don't think it's true. And unfortunately, it's not just cutting seed oils that has to happen. It's eating less super tasty junk food that you tend to overeat. Here's the thing. Nobody wants to hear that news. I don't want to hear it. I want to be able to eat Doritos until I'm, well, unfortunately, 300 pounds overweight, which is what's going to happen if you eat too many Doritos. It's the Doritos that are the problem. No offense to the Pepsi Corporation, which I believe owns Doritos.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I just wanted to bring it up because I think a lot of people, they are trying to learn and improve, and you hear
Yes.
very different points of view. So I just always want to highlight that. So besides having somebody get jacked, stay jacked, get more jacked, start to get jacked, as a final invitation from you, Dr. Mike, what is your hope or your desire for people listening, if you want to leave them with kind of one last thought, and then also just at the, redirect everybody to all the places that they can find you, that they can find the apps, and
Sure.
And just learn more about what you're doing, or sign up for the programs or any of that.
Yeah, I'm a crappy salesman. So just go on YouTube, type in Dr. Mike or Dr. Mike Israetel. Good luck spelling my last name. RP lifting, RP strength, and you'll get our YouTube channel. You see my face. There's tons of videos. Click around, subscribe. If you like the videos and you find them informative, you can always click in the descriptions. You can sign up for our apps there. So the funnel will take care of the rest. So that's only one way to find me, and that's probably the best. I'm also on Instagram. I'm not hard to find. So get on there. But, what I want to leave people with as far as a little word of encouragement or something is, you always have tons of options. So don't put a ton of pressure on yourself. There's no pressure to get lean. There's no pressure to get jacked. It's not life or death, at least not right now in this moment. Just think about if you want to get a little bit more into fitness, take your time, dip your toe in, ease in, set some just really small goals. Be consistent with something like 2 workouts a week, each one 30 minutes at a time. After a few weeks, you're not going to hate it as much. You're going to maybe like it a little bit more. If you want to do more, great. If you just want to keep doing that, no problem. There's a lot of people screaming and yelling, well, I'll have to get fit. Well, I'll have to exercise, blah, blah, blah. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, that just seems like a lot, So come try fitness a little bit. It's really fun. Eventually you learn to love it. You might like it right away. It's got all these crazy benefits, but don't put a ton of pressure on yourself to like just do the thing now. And one thing I hate is like New Year's resolution time is people are like, this is the new me. Like, don't new me yourself. You're always the you that you are. You can just be a little bit better every day. Some days you're worse. No big deal. You pick up, you start again. Treat yourself with kindness. Ease into your fitness. You're going to have a great time and you're going to get awesome results.
Well, Dr. Mike, I really appreciate, I know you gave me a lot of time, and I appreciate what you're doing. And I have to say, we're hearing my guy Casey talking about just in the few weeks he's been doing the program, I think he said 6-7 weeks, he's lost 11 pounds. I just wanted,
and noticed a new back muscle.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. Of course I tuned that out, right? Like I heard the weight loss
Boring.
And you're like, no, we're talking about the muscle. I think it's important because it is all hands on deck. I think everybody who can play in the space and support other people who are interested in starting or learning or restarting. So I really appreciate it. And I just thank you for your time today.
I loved being on your show. Thank you so much for your time today. And you're someone I look up to because I eventually also want to be 6'3". It just has never happened for me, but I'm working on it every day.
I'm sure you'll figure it out. So thanks again for joining me and listening to the Gabby Reece Show. Make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss a conversation. And if anything showed up today that you find would be helpful to someone you know, pass it along and make sure to share with us what really resonated and stood out for you in this conversation. Thanks again for joining us. Keep going, and I'll see you next time.